If your football team had one option in their playbook, the results probably wouldn't be great. The same could be said for your investments. SIBO index options like SPX and XSP can help expand your investing strategies with cash settlement and potential tax advantages. If you're ready for a more dynamic game plan, head to betterwithoptions.com. SIBO, life is better with options. Your investments could be too. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at SIBO.com/US_disclaimers.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at TurboTax.com.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast, and it's time for the long-awaited, much-anticipated return of Remember This Crap. Even though we made it through, I'm sure we want to give everybody time to go through every season from 1980 to 2011. Is that where we stopped?
Digest it
now
all.
That you've had time to go through all those, now it's time for a brand new batch of crap. We're not committing to doing every position, but today we are going to start with great. I shouldn't even say that because there aren't
exploration.
Let's just say Centerfielders in Cub history.
an exploration, if you will.
So anyway, with me,
position.
Yes, with me as always is Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Andy, doing good. Good to be back.
Have you been thrown out of any Little League games lately? That's America.
Not in the last 6 weeks. I think I made it through June. I got a game tomorrow.
Oh.
One of our last games of the year. So knock on wood. But no, it's been a while.
Yeah. So do you go full Bobby Cox? You get thrown out of games, and then also do you pick your nose on purpose in the dugout to get the camera off you? Do you know that was a trick that people assumed that's what Bobby was doing? Either that or Bobby just constantly picked his nose.
No. We could share this too because I've shared it with some friends because I don't have a whole lot to be utterly embarrassed about. It sounds pretty bad on the surface, but I actually put myself into the frame, as you'll know.
Oh, I can play the audio for everybody.
In the incident to which you're referring, but yeah, one of my coaches, and I've coached with for a while, has been very good about getting a GoPro on, and recording all of our games. And it's a lot of fun. We kind of break it down, and then it just so happens.
Does he wear the GoPro on his head?
No, he positions it, and it's fine at our home fields because he knows the layout. But he goes up on that sort of parabolic backstop that they have in a lot of Little League fields, and fastens it to it, so you basically can watch our games with a view from right above the umpire, which comes in handy.
I'm looking at it right now.
When you have a situation in which a manager is watching his kids just struggle, which would happen. We're kind of a youngish team, and we've taken our lumps this year in this sort of a house all-star type of a league with about 20 games and a couple tournaments. And, getting crushed early on by a team that's been playing a lot longer and seeing my pitcher kind of maybe get squeezed on a lot of hittable pitches, which would be help if the kids maybe swung, move the game along. And as an umpire myself,
do you guys have a pitch clock?
Thank God we don't.
That fixed MLB baseball.
Yeah, we should. I've shouted at my kids in the past when they sort of step off the mound and try to get the guy there. Let's move the game along. Let's go. Your fielders are getting on their heels. so you
Oh, did I
can't
miss
hear
it?
me. I'm off.
I didn't.
There it is. I'm off screen. I just been
There it is.
ejected.
Way to read the room, Blue.
Enjoy the walk show.
Enjoy
Way
the
to
walk
read
show.
the room, Blue.
Well, it's a spin. It was my best improvisational attempt. Really, it's a spin. I guess if I were to like justify it, it's a spin on the old ump show.
Yep.
But it wasn't like this guy was making a show out of himself. My frustration was that we're getting clobbered. This team came from Crystal Lake. They didn't drive 40 minutes to play a 4-inning game. I'm speaking for them too because their manager was cool with me. They scored their 7-8 runs in the first inning. You know, if their kids have good eyes, great. Let them keep watching. You know, or let's just move the game along. Was my point. My kid was struggling. I'm not blaming the ump for our failure that game, but I was just frustrated that he couldn't read the room and you know, maybe start calling some of those pitches on it. So no, this is not a rip from the headlines Dateline piece where, you know, I'm just being a belligerent asshole complaining because he called my guy out at third base and then I end up assaulting him. It was a little bit more nuanced than that, I'd like to think. But yeah, my first ejection. So enjoy, folks. We can put the link in there if you look at the 6-minute clip. So
Have were you ever thrown out of a game as a player?
I've been warned, usually played softball, been warned a couple times, you know, kind of chirping a little bit on Blue, but no, never close as a Little Leaguer. And as a fan, that's kind of hard to do in Little League games. So, no, my record was clean. What about you, Andy?
I've been thrown out of a Little League game and a high school basketball game.
Oh, shit. Congratulations. Little League game as a player?
As a player. Both as a player.
Oh, I think you may have mentioned this before, or no?
Maybe on the podcast
No.
I may have even mentioned it. So in Little League,
Yeah.
I got hit by a pitch, and I started to go to first base, and the ump told me I had to come back because I didn't try to get out of the way. And believe me, I tried to get out of the way. I'm no Anthony
weren't
Rizzo
wearing one?
or Miguel
You're not-
Amaya. I did not
wear it?
want to get hit. It hurt, and I didn't want to do it. I got hit right in the thigh too. It hurt.
That's an insult to have it. It's kind of impressive. He thought you were badass
Yeah.
enough, I suppose.
So he made me
wear
come
one,
back,
but-
and I actually knew the pitcher. And the next pitch, I hit a double. And I'm standing on second base, and I yelled to the pitcher, and obviously loud enough for the ump to go. I said, "Hey, Riggs, I go, if it hadn't been for that effing ump, I'd only be on first base." And I got tossed. The best part of that story was that was a makeup game. We'd had a rain out, and we had to make it up in the morning because that afternoon was the All-Star game. And I was
Okay.
in the All-Star game and had the same ump.
Oh. Jesus Christ.
I did
Wow.
not get thrown out of the All-Star game. And I got thrown out of a high school basketball game against Rockford Christian Life. I was actually having a great game. And I went up for a rebound, and it hit the rim twice. I didn't expect it, so I completely mistimed my jump, and otherwise I was going to have an easy putback. And I fumbled the ball out of bounds, and I went, "God damn it." And I got thrown out. I got 2 techs and got thrown out. And
That was not directed at an official's call.
No, it was directed
just
at
yourself.
my awful hands.
But you were
And
in
I'm
Christian
standing. I
school?
thought I just got 1 technical, so I didn't leave the.
Wow.
I thought what happened was I got 1 technical, and the coach took me out, mad at me for getting technical.
Yeah.
And then
A double T?
and he goes, they're shooting free throws, and he looks at the ref, and he's like, "Wait a minute, did he get 2?" And they're like, "Yeah."
He got
They
four-
go, and he has
the
to
guy got
leave.
4 free
They
throws?
point at me, and they're like, "He has to leave." And I'm like, "Well, what did I do?" And so
Said the Lord's name
our
in
coach
vain.
asked the ref. He goes, "What did he say?" And the ref walked over and told him like he said, "God damn it." And he's like, "Well," he goes, "It's not that bad." And the ref like points at because it was Rockford Christian Life. Says, "Yeah, but you can't say that against them." Like,
their version of touchdown Jesus on the wall or something.
so I had to go.
I did get a technical
My dad
once
was
in like a
not
7.
happy. I got it worse from him than I got from the coach.
Because he drove all the way to whatever school that was.
Nah, it was a home game.
So, it was a home game.
Mhm.
Oh. So it was your team. I mean, you must have really let down all of
But
the
apparently the ref
instructors
was
and
very
nuns.
conscious of the fact that there was a kind of a half-assed Christian school that we were playing, and got to be sensitive.
Got it.
Yeah.
I had it wrong. I thought you were at their place. Yeah, I once got a T.
No, we got
like,
in
in
a fight at
7th
their
grade.
place. A
even
fight
better.
that spilled out onto the floor, and some of the fans got involved. it was quite a time for
not very turn
upstate
the other
Illini East basketball or whatever we were. What were we?
Wow.
Something like that.
Heady times.
Our conference changed like 3 times when I was playing. Anyway, people are very excited now. We've talked about Little League baseball and high school basketball. Just what you want. I remember this crap.
Sure.
So anyway, the reason that this came up organically while we were going through all the 30 whatever seasons of exciting Cubs baseball, and like when we were kids, the lament was always that the Cubs had this huge hole at third base. They talked about it all the time, to the point where as young kids, we believed it. But
starting in like the late 80s, I think, right around the time Ron Sano started coming back around.
Right, it was mostly started by Ron Sano, I think. It was his Hall of Fame propaganda campaign.
Right. In retrospect, that was the whole deal.
It's Ron's fault.
Yeah. But that became the narrative. Yeah,
but it was also,
and at that point,
it also turned out to be ridiculous because he played until 73.
I believe that's correct.
Traded to the White Sox. Shortly thereafter, Bill Madlock won 2 batting titles.
Right. He was immediately replaced by Madlock, who to this day is still the only Cub to win more than 1 batting title, let alone back-to-back years, which is a remarkable achievement.
And then there were some fallow years. There was Ken Reitz.
Sure, because the Cubs sucked.
Steve Ontiveros. But then there was the functional, if not tiny, Ron Say.
Ron Say, yep. They got a year out of Vance
They
Law,
got an all-star season out of Vance Law.
Yeah, Luis Salazar. We had a nice, consistent run of mediocrity with Steve Buechele for like 3.5 years. That was about as steady as it goes. So it wasn't, in retrospect, it wasn't so horrible, but that was the narrative, the lament.
And then in 2003, they filled the spot for like a decade.
About a decade
with Ramos Ramirez.
Yep.
And then shortly thereafter, we had Chris Bryant, and now Nick Madrigal.
Well, in all seriousness, we've had a rookie that hit, granted a 30-year-old rookie, but a good defensive third baseman for another couple years.
Who set the Cub record for rookie home
runs. Yeah.
And he broke broke the old guys. He broke Chris Bryant's record.
So now they're just pushing through.
Just awash in talent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway.
But you're right. So you have a 30-year fallow period, which is stark, but again, that tracks. The Cubs were mostly bad in those 30 years, and they were bad at other positions too. So.
But then, as we started going team by team and talking about history and whatever, it became very clear that there is a position on the field that the Cubs cannot adequately fill long term. They just haven't been able to do it. I always said they hadn't done it since the 40s with Andy Pafko. Yeah. But it turns out that you were right. They did it in about the time we were born. They had a functional, more than competent center fielder for 5 years.
And that is the bar you're defining the bar at a very elevated. Like Andy Pafko would be considered a great player. So the last great center fielder, and that's true still. We're just looking for an upright, ambulatory, half-decade dude that is league average and maybe probably a little bit better. Monday was probably a little bit better than league average, but out of an admittedly important position that's not the easiest to fill. It's either the first or second best player on the field is your center fielder. Fine, it's fine, but come on, can't be that.
Yeah. So in 1972, they traded Ken Holtzman to the A's and they got Rick Monday. And Rick was pretty good.
Monday,
he was pretty good at center field for 5 years. And then
first ever amateur.
They traded him for what?
Not Bill North, right? No.
They traded him and Mike Garman for Avonda Jesus, Bill Buckner, and Jeff Albert.
Yeah. Yep.
So they got a good player for him. They got Bill Buckner. He won a batting title for the Cubs.
Well, and Jesus was a shortstop, a good, probably an above-average shortstop in an era of all-glove.
And then they turned Avonda Jesus into Larry Boa and somebody else. I don't remember.
That is a good point. Rick Monday, in effect, led to Ryan Sandberg.
Oh, Ryan Sandberg. That's right. Hall of Famer Ryan Sandberg. But so Rick Monday played 5 years for the Cubs. In those 5 years, he had the best 5 years of his career for the Cubs.
Is that right?
He had 270. Actually, he had the best 5-year stretch of his career for the Cubs. 270 batting average, 366 on base, 460 slugging. That's an 826 OPS. He had 106 homers in
Wow.
4 years. And then you're going to love this. Rick stole 37 bases in those 5 seasons. Okay, that's 7, a little over 7.
Yeah.
He did that in 79 attempts.
Wow.
He got thrown out 42 times trying to steal. It was 37 of 79 stolen bases. Maybe stop running. It's just a thought.
It makes me wonder then too, and I don't know how well the defensive metrics could gauge this. Because I have no idea. I could ask my brother, but even he was probably really too young. He was a big Rick Monday fan as a little kid, I believe. But how proficient, how good of an actual center fielder he was. Gosh, if he's not that fast, this is an era like Gary Maddox of Philadelphia might have been like the gold one. He's the guy they said, Earth is covered by 70% water, the rest covered by Gary Maddox. Supposedly it was originally said about Willie Mays, but
I thought that was Walt Harris. I thought that was Bears defensive back Walt Harris.
Yeah.
That wasn't original?
You mean one of Dave Wannstedt's finest first-round draft picks, Walt Harris?
I think Walt had.
Believe it or not,
I think he had a T-shirt that said that. This is pre-obvious shirts. Obvious shirts have been all over that, but Walt had to make his own.
Yeah, it probably was a Willie Mays thing, or maybe even applied to like Cobb or whatever. But it was certainly said about Gary Maddox. But in that era of the 70s, that was an era where Lou Brock would become the stolen base. They're like, if he only played left, and you got to figure center fielders were fleet of foot. Rick Monday played center, and he wasn't fleet of foot. So I just wonder, was he a handicap? Would he been better off than left? Because I know when we saw Rick Monday, we think of the guy that broke the Montreal Expos' heart in that Game 5 in the 81 league championship
series.
I
thought you meant he broke their hearts when he rescued the burning flag against them.
Oh, right. Yeah, we should probably
Expos.
Yes, that was as a Cub. Once that happened, that cemented the destiny of eventually becoming a Dodger, of course. So it happened while he was a Cub.
People can look this up. I could try to find it, put it with the post. One of the best bobbleheads the Dodgers have ever done is of a Cub. They have a bobblehead of Rick Monday rescuing the flag, and it's a great bobblehead. But he's in a Cub uniform because he was a Cub. It's like how come the Cubs didn't get on that and make that bobblehead?
Right.
But I mean, I guess there's no more connection with Rick and the Cubs. He's been the Dodger radio announcer for 30 years or some reason.
Yeah, he's kind of an interesting
ever since Vin stopped doing it all by himself.
Okay.
When Vin would do the first 3 innings on TV, and then somebody, eventually it was Charlie Steiner, and Rick Monday would do 4 through 9 on radio.
I know he still does it. I will tune in a game. Certainly I'll tune in a game if Zach is doing all 9 innings, and I'll just switch to the other team broadcast. But the other interesting fun fact about Rick Monday, since this is the perfect way to kick it off, and we can throw the whole kitchen sink as to what we know and throw out any fun facts, is he is the first ever baseball player drafted in the amateur draft, 1966.
The number 1 overall pick by the Kansas City A's, right?
There was the Kansas City A's, right, and then he came up with Oakland, and then from there, as you said, they traded for Holtzman, and for 5 years. And at the time, I'm sure Cub fans were like, okay, because at that point, you're only 25 years removed from Andy Pafko. You're only 25 years removed from a pennant. Center field, if you want to kind of maybe go a little bit back, that when you talk about the DeRocher era Cubs, the 69 Cubs, so to speak, but really from 67 to 73, a team that was perennially, on paper, as good as any other team. One of their fatal flaws was a lack of a center fielder.
They had Don Young.
They had Don Young.
So that Ron could run out during a game and yell at him.
And show him up. Yeah, throw up his teammate. And that was, and I remember there was revisionist history that talked about how, well, of course, the Cubs had an interesting player in the early 60s that they came up around the same time as Billy Williams and Ron Santo, but they traded him for Ernie Broglio, and then he went on to win a World Series that season with the Cardinals in 64 and then again in 67 and became a Hall of Famer because he barely got 3,000 hits and set the record for stolen bases. But by all accounts, Lou Brock was a terrible left fielder. So it does not fit. It would be nice because he was fast. You'd think he'd be a good defensive player. Apparently he was not. Otherwise, that narrative, that alternate narrative would have fit too perfectly that had the Cubs held on to Lou Brock. They would have had their center fielder in 69, but doesn't track. They didn't have a center fielder. That was their flaw. And then, ironically enough, they would have a very competent one for 5 years, which would be the last ones they would have forever. Because, like, for us, it just, sounds so crazy. 5 years, Rick Monday, same guy, center field.
It's funny. It's hard to tell, because we didn't see him, how good a defensive center fielder. He did play center field in Oakland, but he did it between Joe Rudy and Reggie Jackson. And we know Joe Rudy and Reggie Jackson were going to play center field. He gets to the Cubs, and he's playing between Billy Williams and Jose Cardinal. And they're not putting Rick Monday in left field. I think Billy, especially that first year, Billy probably should have been the MVP that year.
And 72?
Yeah.
Well, Forklift, our friend, will tell you that both in 1970 and 1972, Johnny Bench edged out Billy Williams for MVP. And Fork had once had the privilege of meeting Billy Williams at something, and it's all he could talk about. If you mention 1970 Johnny Bench or 72, you will basically, it's like spinning a top with Billy Williams. So, so still in his prime, but Billy's now on the other side of 30. So how good of an outfielder is he? Right, he's a great hitter.
Well, here's Billy in 72. He hit 333, a 398 on base, a 606 slug. That's 1,005 OPS, 37 homers, 122 RBIs.
Damn. How old was Billy in 72?
34.
Whoa.
And he finished second in the MVP in 1970 when he finished second in the MVP. He hit 322, 391 on base, 586 slug, 977. He hit 42 homers, 129 RBIs. He led the league in runs and hits. He had 205 hits. It's the third time his career had 200 hits. He led the league in total bases.
And he was 32.
Let's see. Johnny Bench. So Billy led in runs and hits. Bench led in homers and RBIs. He had 45 homers and 148 RBIs as a catcher. So you can kind of see why.
And I think my dad used to speak highly about. He was kind of a revolutionary defensive catcher. I think he was. He was a little bit of a new prototype, it felt like.
And in 72, Bench also led the National League in homers and RBIs, 40 and 125.
That's pretty insane when you think about it. I don't think catchers do that very often, do they?
Johnny Bench was not that they knew it at the time. Johnny Bench in 1972 had an 8.6 WAR. Joel Morgan had a 9.3. Of course, he wouldn't have known what that was, and
right,
probably would have thought it was bad.
So, Billy Williams at 34, still banging the ball all over the ballpark better than anybody in the league, but he's not your center fielder. I don't know. Jose Cardinal, I can't speak to his baseball ability. He's obviously well known as a character, good enough ball player to play, however long. But, I don't know. Well, any listeners that are older than us that saw Rick Monday play, if they can remember any particular defensive prowess, I'd be curious. Because, again, I'm picturing the old veteran that hit the homer off of Steve Rogers in '81 that won the pennant for the Dodgers. That was towards the end of his career. I knew he was an ex-Cub by then, but certainly wasn't a center fielder.
So it's kind of ironic. So Rick Monday missed the A's three-peat because he got traded to the Cubs the year before.
He did, 72, 73,
Billy
74.
missed it because he got traded to the A's after it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So those two sandwiched the World Series.
Well, Monday got his due with the Dodgers because he was there in time for them to lose to the Yankees in 77 and 78. He was there every day. So what was he? Was Rick Monday the Dodgers center fielder in 1977 at the age of 31? If so, that would probably give some evidence that he was not a horrible player if he was that old. I am trying to find the defensive
In 81, he was a bench guy when they won the World Series.
Yes. By then, he was like Mr. Pinch Hitter Extraordinaire.
My favorite Dodger of all time, Kenny Landreau, was playing center field for that team.
Yeah. He only played 115 games, but in all 115 games in 77, he played in center. So I would say he was the primary, but he was being phased out because in 78, he played in 103 games in the outfield and only 79 in center for the Dodgers. So, not sure who they eventually brought in. You mentioned Kenny Landover. Kenny came out 81 from Minnesota. I want to think there's somebody else in there, but so
good old number
Bill
44.
North. Yeah, Dodgers themselves. Yeah, so good enough. The offensive numbers were terrific. Those numbers played today out of center field that Monday was putting up.
Yeah. He's almost as good as Mike Tauchman.
Hey, friend. Oh, can I tell a quick Mike Tauchman story?
Sure.
As you know, I live in Palatine Township. My kids go to Fremd. My tax dollars support District 211, and I'm actually literally wearing a Fremd softball hoodie right now. My daughter played a couple years. Anyway, at the Cubs game, that game was probably one of the greatest games I've ever seen. Actually, I've been going to games since '79. It was Marcus Stroman's Memorial Day 1-0 one hitter against Tampa Bay. First time I got out there, took the family out there. We're sitting in our seats over there in front of the railing in 204. And sometime around the sixth inning, they're a little bit of a cluster. As you know, you've sat in those seats. Sometimes people can congregate around a vendor or whatever. Yeah. So I was kind of looking around, and there was a guy kind of in front of me, and he asked me, the score was 1-0, and he asked me how the Cubs scored. And I said, I just said, local kid, because that's me. Local kid, Mike Tauchman hit a sacrifice fly. Guy looks at me and goes, that's my son. I'm Bob Tauchman. He sticks out his hand. I'm like, really? And of course, I'm like, my daughter, she goes to Fremd, blah, blah. And then he goes, I live at so-and-so, right behind Fremd. Of course, my kids look up the address on the phone. Because I was admittedly a little suspicious. Because first of all, what is this, this all good? He just said, sure. I'm like, first of all, why do you ask me the score? Like, your son's playing for the Cubs. You don't know that he drove in the run?
Was it because Taylor was interviewing him and he couldn't see for an inning?
But then, why are you all the way down the left field line by my seats? Like, your son's on the Cubs. But I kind of reasoned that, well, this guy probably has his own tickets. There's probably a huge demand because this is around Memorial Day. I mean, there's Tauchman's only been up for a couple of weeks, and he's probably having to fulfill a lot of requests for the local guys. So, but yeah, I was able to find like a Google image. I'm like, it checks out, but it was pretty. It was pretty funny. I don't think he would have introduced himself if I wasn't the weirdo that went into sports radio. Was a local guy, Mike Tauchman. Like, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to tell him who I am. So, yeah, nice guy, Bob Tauchman.
As Sean Connery would have said, when you doubted whether that was Bob Tauchman or not, Sean Connery said in The Untouchables, who would claim to be that who wasn't?
Well, he did have the sole RBI in that game. Mike Tauchman is a center fielder to sort of bring everything to the end, and he is 33, but
and we slow
can
as shit.
Finish at the high note. Like Rick Monday, perhaps.
Maybe. Yeah, he's the modern day Rick Monday.
Well, except I
talk about how slow he is often. I like Mike Tauchman. I'm glad he's one of the few productive Cubs. I'm happy to have him. But
he worked in that bat.
Tonight, Cody Bellinger was healthy enough to play center field, and he's in center field, and Tauchman is in right. And that's fine. He should be in one of those corners but the other problem with Mike Tauchman is Mike never hits the ball hard ever. He hits about 85 miles an hour, and so eventually these little things are going to drop in, and you're just going to have to wave goodbye to Mike Tauchman. He had an incredible half with the Yankees a few years ago. Like, he was basically he was MVP Mike Tauchman, and then all of a sudden stopped hitting because the little pop-ups that fall in 4 times
eventually
a week
don't
boost your average, all of a sudden are getting caught.
And you should always remember him fondly because during his brief time with the Giants, when he also had a 3-week spurt, he robbed Albert Pujols of what would have been a record-breaking walk-off game-winning home run. So
he is fondly remembered by Giants fans for 2 reasons. Number one, robbing, it was for the same thing, but for two reasons with that. It kept Pujols from getting another home run on his way to 500, but it won the game for the Giants. And the Giants won 107 games that year, and the Dodgers won 106.
Whoa!
So that was like a direct, that's literally a game that Mike Tauchman won for them. Because it was it would have won. Well, I don't think it was the 9th inning, but it would have put the Dodgers ahead. There was somebody on. So it wasn't just that
a walk-off.
Was it the 9th inning?
No,
I don't know. I know that it kept the Giants ahead and they won.
Pujols had a personal mark, I thought, that would have set the record for most walk-off home runs or something.
Okay.
I thought.
Maybe that's what it was.
I'd have to look
I know he
that
was
up
on
now.
when he's trying to get his 500th home run.
So like Rick Monday, a lot of fun facts there with Mike Tauchman.
So Monday leaves. He traded to the Dodgers. And the Cubs have a different center fielder every year for the next 8 opening days.
Whoa, it's before our time, so I don't even know if I can guess that. So what's the first year? The
77.
year Buckner. Bobby Mercer come back?
Jerry Morales.
In his first go-around, he was an all-star that year. All-star, Jerry Morales. All-star center fielder.
Yeah, so they're like, hey, we got it. It's solved. We have center field solved. Even better than Rick Monday.
They didn't even know they had a problem. They're like, oh, my God, we went 25 years between Pafko and Monday. Thank God we're not going any longer.
We can shake a tree, and a center fielder falls out of it.
So Jerry Morales in his Vince Law-like season.
Jerry Morales, 290, 348, 447.
And probably was the opening day center fielder in 78, but not necessarily the center fielder of record in 78.
Yeah, he didn't start opening day. That was Gene Klein's.
I remember Gene Klein's as a coach.
Yes, as a fat coach. And probably wasn't a fat center fielder.
That's your 78 opening. And we're doing opening day or who struck out.
I did opening day because there's some pretty. Let's see, 78.
Yeah, I think it's more.
The guy who played center the most was Greg Gross.
Oh, future Philly. Okay, got it. All right.
Not all that well. He had an 80 OPS plus. 1979. Jerry Martin.
Yeah, and okay.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, what the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass f- So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Jerry, 272, 321, 453. Yeah, he was league average. He was a 101. He was league average. Way to go, Jerry.
And the next year, he would not be the opening day center fielder, but he would take the Cubs home run crown from Dave Kingman with, I believe, 23. Yeah. And Kingman had 48 and 79.
Yeah. 1980.
Yeah, I've talked about this on previous Remember This Crap. My dad was so upset that they let Carlos Lezcano be the center fielder instead of Scott Thompson.
Jerry Martin started the most games in center, but Carlos Lezcano played center. And what is he probably more famous for?
His brother who had 6 toes?
His cousin had 6 toes.
Oh, I thought it was his brother.
Six-toe Lezcano's his cousin.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, 6-toe's been brought up before.
But your dad must have been happy in 1981.
Yeah, because Scott Thompson was the opening day center fielder?
With 1 T. Not in Thompson. Only 1 T in Thompson. Also only 1 T in Scott.
You pointed this out in a previous – he also had like 3 or 4 different Cubs numbers, which basically meant – every time he got sent down, they figured he wasn't coming back.
Somebody better got his number. 25, 29, and 18. Real name, Vernon Scott Thompson.
Poor Scott Thompson.
He was first-round draft pick of the Cubs in 1974.
Nice job, Bob. I'm assuming Bob Kennedy.
Who could they have picked instead?
In 74 over Scott Thompson?
He was the 7th pick. Let's see.
Jesus.
The 13th pick, Gary Templeton.
Okay.
The 16th pick, Lance Parrish.
Okay, a couple of very above-average players for a while.
The 18th pick, there's a couple of future Cubs that they could have picked. The 18th pick from the Royals, Willie Wilson.
Oh, wow.
And probably would have helped a little bit more. The 21st pick, Rick Sutcliffe.
Wow. How
Cubs
about
took
that?
Scott Thompson 14 picks ahead of Rick Sutcliffe.
They ended up getting, yeah.
Oh. They got the best years out of Sut anyway.
They did.
But they could have had Joe Carter and Rick Sutcliffe. 1982.
I can tell you because it was part of Dallas Green building a new tradition. We were all very excited about Ty Waller.
Ty Waller would play center field on opening day, and then he would also play in 16 more games that year.
Wow.
17 games. The guy who played the most games in center field for the 82 Cubs.
Because I always got excited on opening day. I'm probably better at telling you the opening day position players were than who ended up actually playing, and I couldn't even get. Was it Leon Durham? Maybe ended up playing the most games in center field.
No, but he's coming up. Leon played most of his games in right. It was Gary Woods.
Oh, our guy, the first member of the '84 Cubs to shuffle off this mortal coil, and who owned Steve Carlton as a hitter.
The 1983 center fielder was Leon.
Well, the center on opening day too.
Yep.
Wow, and he was an all-star. Second, we hit two all-star center fielders: Jerry Morales in '77 and Leon Durham in '83.
How about this 1983 outfield for the Cubs? As eventually somebody else would take over center field. Leon would go to left.
Mel Hall,
Leon Durham, Mel Hall, and Keith Moreland.
Oh,
I would guess that every fly ball landed in they picked every fly ball up. They didn't catch a single one.
Mel Hall is kind of more like the Dwight Smith character category, where he's probably really fast, but just not a good outfielder.
Now, when Mel was a Cub, he didn't do this, but when he was a Yankee, I think, not even an Indian, Mel liked to stick things in other people's pants, but he would stick his batting gloves. He would put batting gloves in each of his back pockets with the fingers sticking out. So that when he hit a home run, as he ran, he would wave goodbye.
Wow.
As he ran around the bases. And he probably hit like 4 homers that year. So that was great.
Right. Good thing he decided to do that towards the end of his otherwise meaningless career, where he had some of his best production with the Cubs.
But Mel Hall in 1983, we had to entice the Indians. A year later, 283, 352, 488. 17
yeah,
RBIs.
we went over. I remember when we did the '83 Cubs, you could actually see like the blueprint of '84, and that Hall was actually one of the better players who turned out not to be on the '84 team. So that when that trade was made, we knew about Joe Carter, but like Mel Hall had really kind of produced over about 300 games. It's funny, he never really did after.
Their outfield
a little bit.
Durham had an OPS plus of 131, Mel's was 128, and Moreland's was 128. They had a good offensive outfield. Not too great defensively. Say hit 24 homers, drove in 90 runs.
Yeah, they had. Well, that was the whole thing. As we point out, '83 was on offense the same team as '84. The big difference was the pitching was completely revamped. They had no pitching.
Some guy won a Gold Glove in his first season at second base.
In a new position. Yeah. Still had a 37-year-old shortstop, but back then that was fine. We didn't expect anything on offense out of shortstop, and even that Garden Gnome.
That was a big year from Larry Boa. 267, 312. He slugged 339.
That actually is 267.
He walked 35 times and struck out 30.
I want to give a pat on the head.
He grounded into 108 double plays. Is that right? No, 3. He didn't do 3 double plays.
Because he doesn't hit the ball hard enough.
No.
Even his old legs are able to get down the line. Yeah.
All right, so here's an easy one. 1984.
Yeah. Now we find if you were to analyze this objectively, this is the sort of oasis between Monday and, granted, 2 all-stars, and one of those is just simply moved to first base, but not really a center fielder. Now on opening day, we not only have a center fielder, but we have a leadoff hitter too, which is not a position, but a luxury that is pretty prevalent on all winning teams, and that is Bobby Dernier.
And he would be the starting center fielder for the next 4 seasons. 85,
also
86,
the next 4,
and 87.
And the next 4 opening days also, and for the primary center fielder. Maybe not the primary, though. He was hurt a lot.
He got hurt, yeah. But he started opening day 4 years in a row.
Dave Martinez was probably the primary center fielder in '87 as a rookie. Jerry Mumphrey was stealing some at-bats, which we unearthed that. We got some really prime production out of a
Jerry
late
Mumphrey
career.
Was amazing.
For the Cubs. Throwing a Billy Hatcher sampling, a Darren Jackson during this time, but it was mostly Dernier.
Let's see. So Dernier played, let's see how many games did he play each of these years. In 84, he played 143. 85, 121. 86, 108. 87, 93.
Okay.
So it was heading in the wrong direction.
Right, each year.
Then he went back to the Phillies and had one good year and one awful year, and then he was done.
Yeah, Cubs got his best years. But even those 4 years, so yeah, the opening day center for 4 years, but not even reaching the bar of 125. He only played 122, 143 is the most he played. He never played more than 121.
Right, he missed at least 40 games every other year, including almost 70 and 87. His stolen base numbers he was a little more efficient than Rick Monday. He stole 119 bases in 153 attempts. He only got thrown out 34 times in 4 years as a Cub.
Wow.
So that's pretty good.
He really was a good ball player.
However, it's not a full season in 87. He really had his one good year as getting on base in 84. He had a 356 on base. Then it was 315, 275, 379 in 87, but only 199 bats.
Yeah, limited. Wow, terrible on base percentage. I called him a great leadoff man. That only applies to the 84 season.
Yep. He didn't. 84, he walked 63 times against 60 strikeouts.
That's the only time he had more walks than strikeouts in his career.
Yeah, he's close. 87, he was even. 19 and 19.
Yeah. So this is the guy now that is like the model of stability. A good player. I'm not going to denigrate Bobby D.
He won a Gold Glove in 1984.
He did in '84. Yeah, he felt like he was a really good outfielder. But yeah, offensively, the best you could hope for, setting the table in '84. But yeah, his OPS plus always under 100. '87 was an aberration, but that was the year of the rabbit ball too. But then I guess that would have been accounted for OPS plus. But in any event, not like the expectation wasn't for center fielders in the early '80s to be productive offensive players. I can't think of any offhand that would have been until like Griffey came along. But really good, leadoff hitter, center fielder. But that's it though. 4 years, and even that too injury plagued to really be that much of a stalwart. But that's the new bar now since Monday's gone. Bob Dernier.
So then in '87. Dernier is the opening day center fielder, but the guy who plays the most center field is Dave Martinez.
It was really good numbers there that I didn't even appreciate at the time. I just remember going over that when we did '87.
Yeah, 292, 372 on base, 418 slug. 8 homers, 36 RBIs, stole 16 bases.
22 years old.
Had to cover a lot of ground between Jerry Mumphrey and Andre Dawson.
Well, Andre had a cannon. I think his range was starting to slow with those knees. So yeah, you might be right a little bit.
But Jerry didn't have to play all the games in left field because there was a young guy named Rafael Palmeiro who played 84 games for the Cubs that year.
Wow, you'd think that Rafael would be left, and Martinez would be in right, and they might have somebody else in the middle. Sorry, never mind. Let that one ride. But you're right. Palmeiro is starting to get at bats in '87.
Let's see.
Not as many to overtake Terry Mumphrey.
Davey is the leadoff man in '88. Although he would not finish the season.
No. Infamous trade, the mysterious trade in April, where all of a sudden Mitch Webster is barely good enough to even play center field. So now what are we going to do? How are we going to get through this?
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, Mitch Webster, that's a year after you got a 22-year-old rookie with a 790 OPS, you've got pasty-ass Mitch Webster trying to hold it down. So, I don't even know who the regular – So, Dave Martinez was the opening day center fielder, you said? Yes. You said leadoff, but you meant opening day center fielder.
Oh, yeah. So opening day center fielder. Let's see. He made it until July 14th when he was traded to the Expos for the great – switch-hitting star, Mitch Webster.
Yeah, who himself would be the opening day left fielder the next year. That shows you how much Jim Fry sold for pennies on the dollar. a 22-year-old center fielder for a guy that would become maybe we underestimated how much Jim Fry was simply paving the way for 1989 Rookie of the Year, Jerome Walton.
Yeah,
but
I think we know that Jim didn't really have a plan about anything.
I know, right. Walton's phone was last.
At the time of the trade, Mitch was really tearing it up for the Expos. 255, 354 on base. He was slugging a cool 313.
Yeah.
And then with the Cubs, he turned it on. 265, 319, slugged 398. 4 homers in 70 games. Way to go, Mitch.
Yeah, attaboy. 29 years old, 7 years older. Cubs lost 7 years.
But, it's not like Dave Martinez had a long career or anything. He only played 16 seasons in the big leagues.
Didn't he come back at one point
to
actually get traded for Brant Brown, I think, at one point?
He was on the 2000 Cubs, and he played about like Mitch Webster, 185, 214, 241. Yeah. He was 35 years old when he came back.
Just, another Dallas Green draft pick, still kicking it.
He had a couple of really good years for the White Sox, 95 and 96.
Wow. No kidding. God, I don't remember Dave Martinez playing for the Sox back then. Or for Terry Bevington.
Actually, even 97, he was pretty good. But see, his 3 years with the White Sox, he hit 302 with a 373 on base and a 438 slug.
Everyday player.
The best years of his career.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, in 96 he was. Kept himself in shape. It's a shame, that's one of those alternate realities. If someone kept a corncob dress in the closet and the Cubs. Here's what's interesting. We're on the topic of center fielders. The next year, just like the anomaly of Jerry Morales being an all-star center fielder in 77 and the anomaly of Leon Durham being 183, is that the Cubs, during all this time, had, I assume, was an all-star center fielder in 89, but definitely the Rookie of the Year, which, again, you're thinking, all right, here we are. But
yeah, Jerome Walton was the opening day center fielder, won the Rookie of the Year, had a 30-game hitting streak.
Yep.
He did not make the All-Star team.
He did not. All right. So, but won Rookie of the Year. So that's the feather in his cap. And, tell me, unlike, Leon Durham out of position, makes the All-Star game because of his bat and his wheels. You got a center fielder that wins Rookie of the Year for a team that wins the division. You probably think you're in a pretty good position as a team.
Let's see. Should he have made the All-Star team? At the All-Star break, 294, 344, 428, 3 homers, 18 RBIs, 13 stolen bases.
When was the hitting streak, I wonder?
Probably not.
Must have been after or bridging it. Because you pointed that out in a previous episode. Like, it was his hitting streak that clinched his Rookie of the Year, because it's kind of a novel. It's 30 games.
Let's see. When did he have the hitting streak?
Still, he only had a 721 OPS that year. But, he was a really good defensive outfielder, too. He made an error on opening day, and then he went 120 games or something without another error.
Looks like his hitting streak was from July 21st to August 26th.
Yeah, so he got hot after the All-Star break.
He had 327, 359, 423 during the streak, 2 homers, 20 RBIs, 51 hits in 30 games. Sometimes guys put together long hitting streaks, and their batting average is unimpressive because you just got to hit one. But he had a lot of multiple hits.
They go 1 for 5. Yeah.
When did he? Was that the year that he pulled his hamstring, or was that the next year? Was that kind of the demise of
I don't
Jerome?
know. You might. Is that what it was? I always thought.
I don't see that he missed. Did he miss? He didn't miss a big chunk of time. Well, he played way too many games. It must have been the next year.
I just have a particularly harsh version.
Oh yeah.
Is that he
only played 116 games, and he was the opening day center fielder.
116 games. He must have been on the DL. Because maybe he was injury prone. I know that
when he played for the Reds, he had a big fat ass.
Well, I was going to say the mean interpretation. I used to use this towards Stacey King too, who had a really good rookie year, 89-90 for the Bulls.
When he was in shape.
Right. Is that Jerome Walton kind of showed up to spring training. This might be inappropriate, or this might be like not fair. But that he's kind of, after Rookie of the Year, he suddenly got a little bit larger, which happens. It happens a lot of players.
Jerome is getting larger.
God knows what would happen if, I had experienced such success. But I don't know. That's probably unfair too. The guy was an elite athlete, elite baseball player over these years. He must have been injury prone. He never had as many plate appearances as he did as a rookie, and he pieced together, his career. But yeah, so maybe it's not like crestfallen, just missed the destiny bus for whatever reason. Maybe he wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, there's plenty of rookies of the year that were not great.
But it does seem a little bit cruel that we're right now we're about 20 years, almost 15 years into this history, this chronology here. All of a sudden we have a Rookie of the Year on a division-winning team and a farm system that's producing talent. It seems that it's sort of couched in success, but it really, he was gone like 2 years later.
Are you saying it's a bad sign that he wins Rookie of the Year in '89, and then he is the opening day center fielder in 1990, and Doug DeCenzo plays more games in 1990 than he does?
Well, and I think he may have still even been the opening day center fielder in '91. Did you already write all this down? Okay, yeah.
3 years in a row.
But I remember being pessimistic about it going into the year. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to capture that magic in '89. And then meanwhile, you mentioned DeCenzo. Did Seth Landrum? Can I just do a Seth Landrum name check? Was he a center fielder? Because we're in the 1990 part now, right? Is that? He was never anything close. He was never anything close to an everyday center fielder. But we are doing an exhaustive history of.
He wasn't on the 90 Cubs. Gary Varsho would have got a little time in center for the Cubs.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully not Lloyd McClendon. Nobody wants to see that catcher flopping around in center.
Right.
So probably mostly Doug DeCenzo, and Doug did pitch in 1990. Doug, of course, one of the best pitchers in Cub history.
True, and he
pitched 5 innings in 4 games and did not allow a run. Struck out 2, walked 2, gave up 3 hits.
Got it. My apologies too. Yeah, Seth Landrum wasn't until '91. Sorry to jump the gun, but you're right. DeCenzo was pretty much the primary fallback, I guess. They didn't know what was going on. Walton is, not going to be the answer. So they don't really have an answer.
What year did Doug get hit in the head with the roof of Olympic Stadium? Remember that?
I don't remember that. I just remember.
Actually, I don't think he got hit. What I remember though, so the Cubs were playing there, and part of the roof fell onto the field. And as a joke, maybe it was before the next game, Doug was taking catching fly balls in the outfield with his helmet on.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Hello, for Doug DeCenzo, his helmet was one that you get the ice cream sundae in. I don't think it was. I know he gave a lot of protection.
Yeah, it's good Robbins.
Yeah, so Jerome is still the center fielder in '91.
Okay.
Played 123 games that year, hit .219. Things were going bad. That was quite a defensive outfield. He had 36-year-old Andre Dawson in right and George Bell in left.
Hey, the two of those guys could still hit the ball in '91. Bell had a good offense. He was the only one of Jim Fry's free agent signing that didn't suck.
They were both all-stars, I believe. I know George was.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Let's see. George was an all-star, and Andre had a good year. I'm going to guess Andre was.
Yeah, well, he's 36, though. So this is Andre.
He had 31 homers and 104 RBIs, and he was Andre Dawson.
Is it Andre's last season with the Cubs or penultimate? He went to Boston for one more. Okay, so he didn't go to Boston until '93.
So he was an all-star in '91, and he finished 14th in the MVP voting.
Yeah. He had a nice little bounce back after that '89 disaster.
Yeah, there's Seth Landrum.
Good.
Anybody else would have played a little center that year? I don't know. Maybe Cleotha Walker got to run around out there as a utility player.
Theo, good old Theo.
So then, speaking of George Bell, you know who the opening day center fielder was in 1992?
Got to be Samuel Peralta Sosa, my friend, right?
Peralta.
Who was
So sad.
Obviously, an exciting, flashy player that probably could make a lot of catches, but had no ability to read the ball or had range, and would something to right. And before he got really big, was effective at cutting down base runners, but never was ever considered any kind of a great outfielder as far as running balls down. Let's say.
Sammy only played 67 games that year because he broke his hand. Right?
That's the 92 season. Yeah, 92. Yeah, he got hurt twice. He got hurt. I can't remember who hit him the first time. Wally Whitehurst hurt him the second time. But in between his first and second injury is when he came off the DL and hit all those homers against the Pirates and Doug Drabeck and Stan Belinda, and the Cubs were 49-51. This was brought up today, by the way, when I compared Hale Daniels' shot from the sniper being equivalent to Trey Mancini's frying pan incident in London. A mediocre team that was hovering and then just needed to be put out. But yeah, so I don't even know where I was going with that.
Another center fielder on that team was Panamanian sensation Fernando Ramsey. I don't know if you remember Fernando Ramsey.
I'm giving that one to you.
Now, you know a guy had a good career when Baseball Reference lists him as center fielder and pinch runner.
Was he?
Fernando played 18 games for the Cubs. He stole no bases. He batted 120 with a 120 on base and a 120 slug, and for some reason I remember him. Good old number 39.
See, good for you. I remember Rolando.
I knew he was
Williams.
from Panama, and sure enough.
I do not remember Fernando Ramsey.
Although he went to New Mexico State.
Oh,
probably a big Lou Henson fan growing up. Jimmy Collins, Lou Henson went to New Mexico State. Said, wait, Lou's been gone for how long? Oh, shit.
And my bad. Urlacher went to New Mexico, not New Mexico State. Yeah. All right, sorry.
So 1993, Jim Lefevre's in town.
Yep. I know who their regular center fielder ended up being, but I don't know who their opening. The opening day was at Wrigley Field against the Braves. Was it Willie Wilson?
Willie Wilson. Yeah. 37-year-old Willie Wilson in center field for the Cubs.
Yeah, of course, and we have to mention this whenever we come across this divide. Willie Wilson was part of the coterie of players in which Larry Himes justified letting Greg Maddux go by making the argument that quantity was equal to quality, and that the Cubs had picked up Randy Myers, who was admittedly the one quality signing, Dan Plesac, Candy Maldonado, Willie Wilson, and I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But Willie Wilson was in his 37-year-old balls was definitely and our opening day center fielder. Now, I remember going to some games in '93. The person who ended up, I don't know what Baseball Reference says, but it feels like this guy ended up being the center fielder was the aforementioned and moment of silence, Dwight Smith. Is that who Baseball Reference puts as the regular?
They have Willie. Let's see how many games Dwight played in center.
Okay, and I just remember Dwight Smith he had hope for because he was 53. Such a great hitter.
He played 53 games in center that year. That's the most he ever played in center field.
Yeah, that's my own memory. He was not the regular, but I just remember that Dwight Smith was the runner-up to Jerome Walton for Rookie of the Year, his teammate, in '89. And that was during a run in which the Cubs would have the runner-up for 3 straight years. And Dwight Smith was and always would have been a solid left-handed bat, killed right-handed pitching, great hitter, smooth swing, great pipes, would sing the national anthem before games. Super fast, too. And this is what was frustrating about Dwight Smith. He was super fast, but a terrible base runner, so it did him no good between home and home, and B, a terrible outfielder. Right. He just could not, like Sosa, he did way worse. He just could not read the ball. So the speed did him no good, but because he was fast, and I'm just assuming Jim Lefevre kind of subscribed to this sort of antiquated notion of, oh, you're fast and you have a glove, you should play center. Dwight Smith got to play 50-some-odd games in what's usually considered the most important outfield position. So I love Dwight Smith.
Dwight's speed allowed him to get out of position really fast. So that was good. Other guys to play center field for the Cubs. Eric Yelding played a game in center field.
Former Astro? Yep. Eric Yelding? Yep. I don't remember him with the Cubs.
Let's see. Anybody else there? Steve Lake came back. Did he play any center? No, he didn't. He just caught. Willie.
Steve Lake came back to '93. Did he play center?
Well, I should have given him a shot out there. Did Sammy play any center in '93? I would think he probably did.
He could have. I'm sure.
70 games. He played 70
Yeah,
games.
more than Dwight Smith. Yeah. That was Sammy's first 30-30 season, by the way. So.
Minus 11 runs saved. No, that's not true, but not good.
No, probably not.
Yeah, but the 93 Cubs were cursed from the very beginning when, 7 games into the season, Sean Dunston tried to get Sean Dunston Jr.'s car seat out of the car and throw it his back.
That was the beginning of the 92. No, that was the beginning of the 92 season.
Well, that's right. 93, he came back and hit 400.
He came back in September.
He was 4 for 10 in 7 games.
I went into great detail about an indelible memory being in DeKalb of Dunston winning a meaningless late season game in September, and Harry was as excited as he was on June 23rd, 84, because Dunston was that kind of player. But yeah, no, Dunston was really not to be seen in 93 till the end of the year.
Now, the 93 Cubs won 84 games. They were led by the great Rick Wilkins at 303 with 30 homers. Mark Grace at 325. Sandberg had a good year, 309. Only hit 9 homers. That's broken hand, Brian Sandberg?
Came back late. Sammy had a 30-30 season. Got a good year out of Greg Hibbard. First year without Maddox, but they still finished over 500. And then
they had
Larry
they had 5 double-digit winning pitchers.
Yeah, and then Larry Himes thought it'd be a good idea to fire his first manager after his second season, in which he showed progress and won more than he lost. There was a trade that happened in '93 that affects this conversation down the stretch. The Cubs, I think, considered themselves out of it, even though they finished 500, which was mostly because they had a hot September, which was portrayed as Mark Grace and the gang saving Jim Lefever's job, which didn't happen. But the trade that occurred was a pitcher the Cubs themselves had acquired down the stretch in '89 from Atlanta, Paul Asmaker.
Oh, yes.
Paul Asmaker. And guess who the Cubs got for Paul Asmaker at the deadline in 1993?
Who did they trade him to?
Their opening day center fielder in 1994.
Oh, Carl Tuffy Rhodes.
There you go. So there you go, Larry Himes. You picked up Tuffy Rhodes, and we have a center fielder on opening day that's going to do something. And this is my first ever opening day. I've talked about it in great detail, listeners, if you missed it. Find the 1994 season. Did many inappropriate things on our way in from DeKalb and spent an entire day in the bleachers when Tuffy kept blasting home run after home run into the bleachers off of Doc Gooden.
It's a game that Marquis loves to show. Yeah. They show it over and over again, even though the Cubs lost.
Yeah, they did by like 5 runs, too. But Tuffy, there's your center fielder. 3 home runs in opening day. You got Rick Monday and Leon Durham as All-Stars. You got Jerome Walton as a Rookie of the Year. And now you have Tuffy Rhodes.
Tuffy played 95 games for the Cubs that year. How many home runs do you think he ended up with?
Like 8?
8. But then
he had another multi-homer game, though.
Then, though, let's look this up. He went to Japan. And, Tuffy was a home run star. In Japan, let's see. Tuffy hit. Am I looking at the right column here? No, that's why.
What do you got, Japanese baseball reference up?
I do. He played for what are they? The Kintetsu, I want to see their nickname. The Osaka Kintetsu Buffaloes. And Tuffy Rhodes was one of their, they only get a couple Americans. These are the home runs he hit. He was there for a long time. 27, 22, 22, 40, 25, 55, 46, 51, 45, 27. Then did he get traded to Oryx? Or are they the Buffalo too? Oh, the team probably moved. They're still the Buffaloes. 42, 40, and 22. He played this till he was 40 years old. In Japan, he hit 464 home runs.
Wow, that's incredible.
He hit.
How old was he in the '94 Cubs?
How long was he in the '94 Cubs?
No, how old was he? He was 25 for the Cubs.
Oh, he was an actual prospect. Just not that
Come
good.
on, yeah.
He stuck around. He was there the next year too. Started the season with him, and then what happened? He got waived. He got waived in May of '95.
He got waived because he was 51.
And the Red Sox
old.
picked him up. But yeah, that trade, for the Paul Asmaker trade, was a 3-teamer.
It was.
It was the Royals.
I just remember
the Yankees and the so the Yankees got Asmaker. The Royals got John Habyan, and the Cubs got Tuffy Rhodes.
No reelection of John.
Larry
Habyan.
Himes won that trade. John Habyan didn't hit 3 homers on opening day, ever.
No.
Screw that guy.
Yeah. Our Cubs center fielder did, though. Who would not be our center fielder a year later.
1995 Cubs.
So now we're ushering in the next era of mini stability since Bob Jr. left.
Yep.
So now we've gone from like 1987, we've gone almost a decade with all kinds of flat Sam. And we bring in, which, talk about a low bar, because this guy's probably going to be in your final 5 of top 5 Cubs center fielders, but it's the Brian McRae era.
Yeah, so they pull off a spring training trade, even though it was on April 5th. Because we talked about that during the year because of the strike. Everything started late.
Yeah, so it wasn't
Cubs
really
traded their prospect perverts in 1995 would have been very upset. The Cubs traded Derek
first-round
Wallace.
Pick. Yep.
And
pick
Gino Moronis, yacht rock sensation. That's Sergio Moroder. That's different. For proven center fielder Brian McRae.
Yes, he was proven.
Like an actual good trade.
It was. It was a good trade by Adelaide, son of Hal McRae, who was on the 1980 Royals. He was just like Junior, leadoff hitter, so you had an automatic. He rolled right into Chicago without any sort of growing pains. He was a proven player. He would bat right-handed against lefty Tom Glavine, which I always thought was strange, but he once got 2 hits in a game off of Glavine doing that. Or he batted lefty against Glavine, I should say. But anyway, for 95 and 96, absolute stability. He a solid center field, not great, but not Dwight Smith, riding a unicycle out there. Set the table at leadoff. These are 2 other mediocre Cubs teams. 95 was just like 93, a team that flirted with 500 and actually did sort of had played meaningful games in the last week of the season, much to the surprise of everybody, which we talked about.
They wouldn't lose down the stretch.
They would not lose because they had those 12 home games in a row. And then after 96, though, Brian McRae started expressing sentiment in the newspapers. Cubs weren't doing anything, which was true, of course, because they would start the season 0-14. And McRae had a terrible 97 season. He eventually was shipped off in that weird post-waiver deadline deal in which Mel Rojas was also shipped off. Turk Wendell was shipped, and we got Lance Johnson. We got some pieces, whatever, that we'll come back to. But from 95, 96, 97, that was the most stability that we had in center field since Bobby Dernier, which isn't saying much.
Yeah, three seasons of relative competence in center field.
Not even 3, because he was dealt in August or whatever.
Yeah, it's one of the things I miss. I miss the ridiculous waiver trades where you had to get guys through, and then you had to guess, and then it would leak out as to who's cleared waivers and who got pulled back.
Right.
Then you had the ridiculousness, the guys would get put on waivers and somebody would claim them to block them, and then every once in a while would burn them. Like the Padres got burned with Randy Myers. They claimed him just to keep him away from somebody else, and then all of a sudden they had to keep him. This trade, it's got to be one of the biggest waiver trades, at least of that era. Because usually it was one guy for one guy. Usually that's what a waiver trade was.
Mm-hmm.
This one was 6 players. And it was 3 guys that the Cubs didn't want, and it was 3 guys that the Mets didn't want, and they were in equivalent positions.
Right.
So there was 2 center fielders. The Mets were sick of Lance Johnson. The Cubs didn't want Brian McRae, so they're in the trade.
That's right.
The Cubs were trying to dump Mel Rojas's contract, which had turned out to be a disaster.
Right.
The Mets, although it was a starting pitcher, were trying to get rid of Mark Clark. So they were more than happy to throw him in. And then they each had a weirdo they wanted to trade. So the Cubs traded Turk Wendell, and the Mets threw in Manny Alexander. But the weird thing was they didn't all clear waivers at the same time. So the Manny and maybe it was just Manny. Yes, Manny Alexander was the player to be named later. They had to put him on. They put him on waivers to complete the trade, and he had to get through waivers. But it was not. I don't think anybody was really concerned that Manny wasn't going to clear waivers, and he did. So he came over 3 days later to complete the trade.
He's like, you think it's hard for me to clear waivers? I can't even clear a hotel lobby with.
I got a towel with $80,000 in it. And then Manny, of course, he's in the Mitchell report, allegedly. paying a clubby to go pick up a package of anabolic steroids for him somewhere.
Yeah.
A lot of good that the steroids
funny.
did Manny Alexander.
It is funny
his
that
career,
some of the players...
15 home runs in 11 years.
Yeah. Right.
He would only had like 11 home runs without the steroids, so it was worth it.
True.
But because of that trade, the next 2 seasons, the starting center fielder for the Cubs is Lance Johnson.
Yeah, the one dog, right? Although in 98 he was hurt too much, so like Brant Brown, our guy, who will always be known because of the aforementioned Ron Santo making things about him. Even though the Cubs, even though the Cubs still went to the playoffs, Brant Brown, of course, had those 3 Friday walk-offs. Came up as like a first baseman that kind of looked like Mark Grace, but all of a sudden he's playing center field like most Fridays and most days in 98 when Lance Johnson is convalescing. So, again, Lance Johnson, opening day center fielder, 98, 99, but Brant Brown was kind of like the got us through that summer, and that was the playoff season. So, hey, Brant Brown is really the center fielder. I mean, Johnson came back for the playoffs, and, of course, Brown's psyche was probably ruined after the drop in Milwaukee anyway.
Yeah.
But and then Johnson was not a bad player. I think you pointed out one year he batted like 350 for the Mets or something. Decent outfielder, but he was, whatever. He's like in his 30s. We're going to talk about Kenny Lofton when we get another decade into this. But, kind of a late-stage veteran that, for a team that all of a sudden was in the playoffs. And so, sure, I'm not gonna rag on the one dog, even though he missed most of the summer.
It's funny. The year before the trade, 96, Lance hit 333 in 160 games. Like he had 227 hits. He led the National League in hits. He led the American League the year before with the White Sox, 186. At the time of the waiver trade, he was hitting for the Mets 309 with a 385 on base.
Wow. Did he happen to have like a corncob dress hanging out of his suitcase or something?
That's odd. And he was a starting center fielder for the Cubs also in 1999. But he only played 85 games in 98, and he only played 95 games in 99.
Yeah, he was hurt. But when he was there, it was nice. It's like, you get glimpses like we had with Lofton or Dernier. It's like, oh, yeah, oh, wow, look at that guy. He can range from left center to right field. Oh, he can like take a pitch and get on base or whatever. And that's Johnson when he was healthy. I never not appreciated Lance Johnson's baseball playing abilities for the Cubs.
So he missed all those games in 99, but the Cubs were covered because they had Curtis Goodwin to play center field.
Curtis. Yeah. Not Tom Goodwin.
I think Tom Goodwin only a lot worse.
No, right. Yeah. Worst hitter.
Let's see, Curtis probably better known as a Red. Although he didn't play very well for them either. A little left.
I know I was probably drinking a lot. Then I was still single. I know he played for the Cubs.
Bo Porter probably played some center for the Cubs. Future Astros manager.
Astro, yeah.
Hit 192 for the Cubs.
What year are we still on? 90?
99.
99. Sorry. Okay. I just remember who the opening day center fielder was in 2000 in Japan.
Yeah, my boy. He was also the opening day center fielder in 2001.
Sleeves. Damon Buford.
Who for some reason,
part of this,
no matter what the weather, and they weren't even good. He had like these. He wore like a long sleeve shirt under his uniform, but he cut the sleeves off. He could have just worn a short sleeve shirt, like right at the elbow, and they just kind of hung there, ratty looking. It's like, all right, Damon, come on, spiff it up a little.
Well, and he was also part of that cohort of players that Ed Lynch liked to bring in because their parents played baseball.
Right.
All right. Scott Buford and Starge Sr. There are a few others in there, somewhere in there.
Now, Damon was, this is by memory, Damon was a very good defensive center fielder.
I think he was. Yeah, he's a small guy, so I don't think he had a great arm, but I remember him having good range. He should not have been an everyday center fielder, though, for any team with any sort of pennant aspirations. That much I'll tell you.
And he was twice. He was the everyday center fielder for
2000, 2001?
For the 2000. No, he only played 35 games in 01, but he did start opening day. But the 1997 Texas Rangers, he had 224 for them.
Okay.
2000, he had 251 for the Cubs, 324 on base, which is bad. 390 slugging. He was underwhelming.
He was a decent center fielder, so I'll take those numbers.
Other center fielders to play on that team include
a great hope.
Yes, 20-year-old Corey Patterson.
Yeah, the great.
It's
the
ridiculous that they called him up when he was 20 years old.
We're gonna correct the Lou Brock or whatever, number 3 pick in the draft. Not even Jerome Walton had these types of hopes.
Also, that Cub team had Tariq Brock playing 13 games.
I remember. I went to spring training in 2000. I remember seeing Tariq Brock hit a grand slam or something in Hoboken.
But they also had another excellent defensive center fielder,
Todd Dunwoody. I'm sorry, it's not 2001 yet. My bad.
And another legacy player.
Oh, who?
Little Sarge.
Right,
Gary
I did mention Matthews.
Gary Matthews Jr. played 80 games, and this is pre-steroid Gary Matthews. He hit 190.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pull up the 2000 Cubs because there's a third player whose dad played. That's what led us to believe that Ed Lynch was just phoning it in.
Let's see.
Like, I got your dad's number in my Rolodex.
Yep.
I know we talked about it. There's somebody else in the 2000. There is
Julio Zaletta played a little outfield for the Cubs, and it was that the year that he got caught in the vines and was going after the ball and just picking shit out of the.
Yeah, because I always associate him more with first baseman.
Ross Glode,
if he's in the
played
outfield.
on those Cubs.
Another guy kind of reminded me of he was a poor man's Brant Brown, who himself was a poor man's McRae. So that's how far we'd gotten. Yeah, Glode would have a lot more activity with the White Sox.
That was the Willie Green year. Oh God.
Willie Green, and Shane Andrews. We're back to third base.
Yeah, well, I got flashbacks just looking at Willie Green and Shane Andrews. It's like Jesus.
Yeah.
At least they had Jose Nieves that year.
They did. In center field.
No, you just had him. I don't know. So let's see. 2001. The Buford started, but the guy who played center field the most for the Cubs that year was Gary Matthews Jr. And he really tuned up the offense. He wasn't going to hit 190 again. He hit 217. Hot damn.
But, now we're in the era where the front office, desperate to prove they know what they're doing with prospect development, is trying to prove that, like, Corey Patterson's 2000 season at West 10 was not like a setback or a blip, and they continue to push him forward.
Why let him repeat a level and figure it out? Right. Just promote him regardless.
Right. They're like, hey, he looks so good at Lansing and in rookie ball, and let's just ignore the stop sign because it's like year 7 here, and Ed Lynch is about to get fired anyway, and he would during the 2000 season. But Patterson came up in 2000. He came up in 2001, and he had a homer off of Roy Oswalt in an important game. Like, he had flashes, but he just was so damn young, but they were insistent that in 2002, if I could just take the segue, because he definitely was the opening day center fielder in Synergy Field or whatever they call it. John Lieber, coming off his 20-win season, was the starter. Patterson would get off to a nice start. He had like 5 or 6 RBIs in that opening day, and he would the next year too against the Mets at Shea, or Citi Field, or whatever. In 2002, he quickly just crashed. He ended up getting like 600 at bats, but it was bad, right? Corey Patterson's 2002. He was definitely the everyday center fielder in 2002. 2003, he was opening day, but he got injured. So now we're back to someone that's going to be there at least more than a year and a half.
Right.
So far, we've got Dernier, McRae, and now we're Corey Patterson. Because even David Buford doesn't qualify.
But I found your other legacy on the 2001 Cubs. The most obvious one.
Who was that? Because I was looking at 2000. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Your dad. I just saw him at Costco, your dad. He bugged me. Yeah, that's how Ed Lynch was signing players.
The Rebel called up Ed, see if he could get a job for his boy. Hey.
And Ed Lynch is like, I kind of remember you.
Todd needs... Coke doesn't grow on trees. He needs some scratch.
Well, it kind of does, doesn't it?
It's a leaf, right? Yeah, so Corey is the opening day center fielder 2002, 2003, 2004, and 2005.
4 years. He and
longest,
Dernier. Not
run.
even Brian McRae. Okay.
Since Bob Dernier.
Does he also exceed Dernier as far as games played? Because Dernier have gotten outside of that 140 plus in 84 and barely scratched 125. So that's
Let's see.
Now
he has to, because Corey, other than I mean, he got benched, but other than 2003, he was healthy. So he played 2002, 153 games, 03, 83, 04, 157, 05, 126, and then he was an Oriole. That went fast. Yeesh. So, so he plays 4 years, and they don't go great. Let's see. With those 4 seasons combined, Corey hits 256, 296, 420, 64 homers, and he strikes out. Is this a bad ratio? He had 505 strikeouts to 102 walks. Is that bad?
Oh my God.
Your leadoff, and they kept leading him off because he was fast. 296 on base.
I'll always remember that when they got Nomar July 31st, 2004, after we helped engineer that, right? But the very next day, Dusty put Patterson at leadoff, and Nomar too. And then for the next 3 weeks, Patterson hit the hell out of the ball. He was awesome. And whatever, what happened those 2 weeks, but then it totally stopped. But because it took Dusty so long to recognize it, so for 5 weeks, there's just a hole at the top of the lineup with all these great players on that team. Nothing against Patterson; he was put in a spot where he could succeed, and that's pretty much the story of his Cub career. I think somebody brought up. I will go to my grave believing that it is entirely plausible that if he had come up through the Atlanta Braves organization. Yeah. Because he did end up having a nice statistical career. He was a colossal disappointment. He's a little bit like Sean Dunston, no offense.
Hey.
But in the fact that they had very high expectation, a raw natural talent that I think we brought it up. I feel like the Cubs in '85 rushed. Brought up Dunston a little too soon, and that retarded his progress. I can say that because it's contextual. It slowed down his progress. And Patterson for sure. It was because he ended up having a long career because he had enough natural athletic skills to be useful, but it was nowhere near what you envisioned. And I do believe it's something that could have happened if the right organization was able to really sort of nurture him better. Certainly with the Cubs. I mean, that's the one.
So here's actually, he had a really good first 10 games, but here was his August. This is, Nomar arrives on August 1st. This was August 2004 for Corey Patterson. He hit 336 with a 388 on base and a 605 slugging, 8 homers and 18 RBIs in August.
Wow.
So Nomar shows up and he unlocks Corey Patterson. And Corey's going to be an all-star. And let's see, what happened in September? Because we know what happened to the Cubs.
Yeah, we do.
And it wasn't good.
I don't blame Dusty for that now. That's an incredible. I just thought it was a couple weeks.
And here's September. He hit 191 with a 250 on base and a 373 slug. He struck out 45 times and 126 at bats.
He cratered. I do blame Dusty because he still could have adjusted 2 weeks in. He didn't have to take the 1 month of aberration over the 2 weeks of reality. I just remember, and because they didn't bottom out until the end, that could have made a difference.
Yeah, so you're right. Dusty hadn't been leading him off. He hadn't led off all year. He batted either second, seventh, or there's a third in there. Nomar shows up and he installs him as the leadoff hitter, and he takes off. And then he starts to struggle in September, and so Dusty, of course, moves him back down in the... Nope, just kidding. Dusty leads him off every single game the rest of the year, even though he has a 195 on base. Couldn't understand why that team couldn't score any runs. I won. Thanks a lot, Dusty.
What damage did he do to that kid then, too, man. He could have made him successful. He could have, all right, let's pull him out of there. I mean, I don't know who else they would have put Nomar at leadoff. Fuck.
Anybody. Just not Corey.
A decent outfielder, I should say.
Yeah, he was a good defensive. He had a good arm. He was fast, and he had a good arm, and he actually knew what he was doing.
He was a little guy, but he had a good arm. But he was, he was a third pick in the draft. He grew up, around the Atlanta area, and and we got a lot out of him, and he does qualify here. He's in the team photo in my book right now, having discussed this with Dernier, McRae, as far as a quasi-regular. Now we got Corey Patterson. Oh, far from what we hope.
So that was quite a draft class, 1998. The first pick in the draft was Pat Burrell. Second was Mark Mulder. The third was Corey.
Ooh, from South Carolina.
And the Royals got stuck with Jeff Austin. That didn't work. The Cardinals drafted J.D. Drew. Other first-round picks. Austin
who didn't
Kearns.
sign? J.D. Drew didn't sign, right? Right? Isn't that the story? Or he did sign?
He hadn't signed the year before with the Phillies. He was back in the
draft. That's what it was. And then the Cardinals got him in 98. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was that after?
And they ended up trading him. So how about that? They trade him, however, for Adam Wainwright. Fucker's still pitching, even not well.
No, as we saw on Saturday.
They traded him with Eli Marrero. Remember Eli Marrero?
I do. I had him on my work history team. He has shredded his knee in right field at Wrigley on Mother's Day.
On Mother's Day at a monsoon. They had to take out that weird little cart. He had to sit on this cart and bring him in. So I remember this. We're at my brother and my sister's house. My brother-in-law is a Cardinal fan. And my dad and I are laughing. It's just the most hilarious thing we've ever seen. And my brother-in-law not enjoying this. Eli Marrero he was supposed to be their catcher. Like, he was the catcher of the future, and they had him out in right field, and he blew out his knee, and it ruined his career.
Exactly.
Let's see. The Cardinals got Ray King, Jason Marquis, and Adam Wainwright. And Adam Wainwright is still – that trade was 20 years ago, and he's still pitching. Not well, but he's still pitching.
No. Yeah. Well,
let's see. Other first-rounders after Austin Kearns. Sean Burrows, remember he was supposed to be a thing. He was Jeff Burrows' kid.
Yeah, Jeff Burrows' kid, yeah, the Padres, yeah.
Future Cub Carlos Pena.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's pretty...
Jeff Weaver, Kip Wells, Brad Lidge, CC Sabathia. 20th pick in the first round, CC Sabathia. All of
you remember when Kip Wells was the Sox answer to Kerry Wood?
Bubba Crosby.
The first letter Kerry and the last W.
Let's see, Aaron Rowland was a supplemental, was like a sandwich pick in the first round.
Wow.
And then the 43rd pick in the first round by the New York Yankees out of University High School in San Diego, California, Mark Pryor. Who said,
and then he
nope, I'm going to
USC
because I want to be a Cub someday. That's what Mark told him, I'm sure. I want to be a Cub. They'll screw up my career.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, we actually kind of skipped over a center fielder when we jumped to Corey Patterson's 2004, right? Because
Corey
was not there for a playoff team.
And 2003, a guy who, if you were actually listing like the best Cub center fielders and didn't put like a playing time minimum on it,
right? Almost like Lance Johnson.
Is Kenny Lofton, the other guy in the Aramis Ramirez trade, who did nothing but hit from the moment he got to the Cubs. He played 36 games. No, he played 56 games. He was 36 years old. He played 56 games. He hit .327 with a .381 on base, a .471 slug. He stole 12 bases in 16 attempts. And then in the playoffs, the little fucker was on base to start every game, it seemed like. Against the Braves, he hit .328 with a .348 on-base percentage, and against the Marlins, he hit .323 with a .382. And I think, if not for the Steve Bartman-Alex Gonzalez combo, it's either the MVP is either the MVP of the NLCS is either Sammy Sosa, Kenny Lofton, or Mark Pryor.
Yeah,
and it's probably Kenny. He was amazing in that series. He scored like the first run in every game. Like, he would just get on base and he would score and he would get them going.
So clearly we're dedicating this portion of the podcast to quality over quantity, because you said 56 games.
Yeah, that's all he played for the Cubs. And there was a he was in the mercenary phase, right? Like, he had been a great player for the Indians for how many seasons?
Mid-90s, yeah.
He's a borderline Hall of Famer for the Indians. He
great center
300 batting average, 375 on base, 426 slug. He was a good defensive outfielder. Played in the Final Four with Steve Kerr for
correct.
Arizona.
1988. Yeah, Sean Elliott. Yeah.
He was an All-Star in Cleveland. The last 3 years he was there, he gets in the ultimate challenge trade. He gets traded for Marquise Grissom, right? To go to the Braves.
Yes, that was the Braves Indians trade where Grissom was on the '97 Indians that almost won the World Series, and Kenny was not.
Yep.
But Kenny came back to
Kenny goes back to Cleveland, and he makes 2 more All-Star teams. Then in 2002, he becomes a free agent, and I believe he signed with the Giants and then ended up with the White Sox, right?
He did. Yeah.
He splits a lot of seasons. Then he signs with the Pirates and he goes to the Cubs. The Cubs, of course, have no interest in re-signing him after 2003 because they have Corey Patterson, and him and Kenny and Sammy didn't like each other, so that didn't. Kenny not fond of the bullshit that you have to put up with Sammy, so that didn't work.
Right.
Then he went to the Yankees, then he went to the Phillies, then he went to the Dodgers.
The Phillies? Kenny Lawson was on the Phillies?
On the 2005 Phillies. He played 110 games. He hit .335 for them.
Wow.
And he finished up with the Rangers and Indians in 2007. I don't know who he started with. Did he finish with the Indians? One of those, hey, come on home. His transaction page is pretty long. The Indians traded for him in July to get him back, and he finished his career there.
It's a borderline.
Oh yeah, his
Hall of Fame
trade.
career.
Here's how good he was. The 97 trade, it was in spring training. It was him and Alan Embry for Marquise Grissom and David Justice.
Wow.
And then he just signed as a free agent the very next year and went right back to the Indians.
Can I just quickly bring it full circle since you bring up an Alan Embry reference? He was a left-hander that was kind of effective for a while. And when I got my Corey Patterson hopes up, it was at watching a game on TV in spring training in 2000 in Mesa, where a 20-year-old Corey Patterson got around on an Alan Embry pitch and hit a home run. And I was like, wow, like that can sweat. And then he would go on to have a great season in Lansing and then be the youngest player in Arizona Fall League. And then Don Baylor and them could not shut up about how great he was and got into his own head. Anyway, just wanted to bring that up, that it was Alan Embry, a proven veteran left-hander off of whom I saw Patterson hit a home run in spring training that really got me on the Corey Patterson juice. If I could bring that full circle.
So I was just looking at Kenny's most similar batters list, and I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. It's like Tim Raines is on it. That makes sense. Ichiro is on it. And then Ken Griffey. I'm like, wow. And then he goes most similar by age. It's like Rudy Law at 26, Lonnie Smith at 28. And then there's Griffey, Dom DiMaggio,
Wow.
Griffey. And then I realized that's Ken Griffey Sr. That's not Ken Griffey Jr.
Because he was a literal contemporary of Ken Griffey Jr.
I'm like, wait a minute. How did they wait all these? Like, Junior was hitting like 40, 50 home runs. Oh,
right. That's hilarious.
It was Ken Sr. It wasn't Ken Jr.
Because if anything, Lofton was probably handicapped by playing in the same league as Ken Griffey Jr., right? Comparatively. He was obviously nowhere near the offensive player, but probably every bit the defensive player. And just, yeah. So, yeah. Cubs center fielder, Kenny Lofton. Almost a Cubs World Series center fielder.
Yep.
So that puts him in the book, even though he only played 56 games. Puts him in the conversation almost.
Then we get to 2006, and my favorite opening day center fielder.
Oh, is it Juan Pierre?
Yes, Juan Pierre. Yes.
The motherfucker who killed the Cubs in 03 and then was rendered completely fucking useless, but for the fact that he stayed healthy enough to be the first Cub to get 200 hits since Ryan Sandberg. Like, he did nothing right, and then he gets to make off with that kind of a recognition. Yeah. He was a shitbag. He did nothing but bring heartache. I wish nothing but ill will on Juan Pierre and rolling his baseballs down the baselines and grounding out to second base at 10 times the rate that Jason Hayward would eventually do.
Yeah. He
fuck him.
Len Casper had been with him in Florida and had a fondness for Juan, and we got to hear all kinds of stuff. And our favorite, of course, was when he said he'd like to roll his balls down the foul lines before games. Somewhere on Discipio, there's a column I wrote about Juan where I went through and looked, and he led the league in outs like 8 years in a row or something. It's like, oh, that's great. Yeah. He's healthy. He plays every game. He leads off. And his career on base average was 343. His 1 year with the Cubs, it was 330. So it's like, He led the league in caught stealings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Thanks a lot, Juan.
Yeah.
Led the league in stolen bases 3 times. 200 hits 1, 2, 3, 4 times. He had 196 for the Dodgers the year after he left the Cubs.
Of course.
He was just... He had a terrible arm, and they had him playing next to Jock Jones, who also had a terrible arm. So anybody on second base automatically scored on any kind of base hit. It was it didn't matter. There was going to be no play at the plate unless you wanted to watch the ball roll through the grass for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I get it. He's a World Series winner. He was probably a good center fielder with the Rockies and Marlins early in his career. Cubs got him too late, and after he'd already hurt us, and then he just hurt us more by his absolute just woeful play. And then it just makes me more annoyed that he had some success even after he left. He didn't know. He's like Benito Santiago from 1999.
I remember somebody making a big deal out of the fact that, and the Cubs was part of this, he had, I can see it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 years he had more than 650 at bats. That's great. Because he leads off and he never walks. So of course he has a lot of at bats.
Is that something to be celebrated?
He didn't strike out. 38 strikeouts for the Cubs against 32 walks.
And in his defense, a lot of those grounders to second didn't result in double plays because A, he was fast, and B, because they were too softly hit.
He just he didn't hit the ball hard.
Yeah, so it wasn't all bad, but and it was probably fine ranging the balls, but you're right, he had no arm. He was like a midget out there. And then this is also overlapping the time that Jock Jones comes along, which is also the time where a tribute company finally snaps out of their 20-year slumber because they're ready to sell the team, and they, it's that weird period. How does this affect center field? Well, if it's not Juan Pierre, you already mentioned it, it's Jock Jones in center field until, I don't know. Did they throw Matt Merton out there too while we're at it? I don't know.
No. You got to remember this. Juan's Cub career only lasts 1 year. 2007, opening day center fielder. Remember the grand plan?
Yeah.
It's Alfonso Soriano.
That's right. For like 20 games.
Yeah, and he pulled a hamstring.
They moved him left.
And then they moved him into left field, and Jock played center, which was just terrible.
That's why. Okay.
We also got 87 games out of Felix Pie that year.
Hot prospect, the next Corey Patterson. Now that we've run Corey Patterson off the farm, now we got Felix Pie.
But 2007, Alfonso Soriano, I need to look at his splits. Because he starts off okay, but then gets hurt. Comes back in May, and he's no longer the center fielder. And he has a really good May. He has a great June. Then he slumps for a couple of months.
Offensively, he took the Cubs to the playoffs in September.
And then in September, in 28 games, Alfonso Soriano hit 14 home runs.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them to lead off games.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if he was much of a leadoff hitter either, but he was a much better leadoff hitter than the center fielder.
Yeah,
although he
September,
was not an ideal leadoff hitter.
14 homers, 27 RBIs, hit 320, 354 on base, and a 754 slug. Slugged them into the playoffs, and then I think in 2 seasons with the Cubs in the playoffs, he got 1 hit. I think that's
Aramis also.
But of course, they barely spent any time there. They only played 6 games.
Exactly.
They just couldn't win. So you didn't get a lot of reps. You didn't have much of a chance to get
back-to-back playoff teams. But
I was way off.
So these are
3 hits and 2 playoff appearances.
But these are back-to-back playoff teams loaded with talent, but still can't figure out center field. Not that was their downfall in these particular years, but it's telling. Reed Johnson.
No. The 08 Cubs figured out center field eventually with Lassie.
Oh, right.
Jim
That's
Edmonds
what I'm saying.
rode in and had a ridiculous
a
death rattle of his career with the Cubs.
Exactly, which is great. He had a walk-off against the Braves when they were wearing old-timey uniforms in June of that year, I'm pretty sure. Probably video.
Wales, right? And they have their Wales uniforms?
Yeah, I think it was the Wales uniforms. And he was the closest approximation to a useful center fielder down the stretch. So that's what we got out of Jim Edmonds, which is fine. It was cool. And he was a good outfielder as much as we load this whole aura but he was past his prime. But he was part of that team. That team was loaded with talent, but that's what we had at center field. They were trying to,
So Jim Edmonds he gets traded to the Cardinals. Finally give up on him after 2007. He has a mediocre. He was super productive for them in a very annoying kind of way. His last really good year for them was 2004. They went to the World Series, got swept by the Red Sox. He had 42 homers, 111 RBIs.
Wow. Was he on the 06 team, though? Because that's the team that actually won an ill-gotten World Series.
Yes, he was on the 06 team. He only played 110 games. He was starting to get injury-prone.
In
08, he got traded, I think, to the Padres for Ryan Ludwig. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right. I remember Ryan Ludwig. Wow.
No, David Freese. Oh, David Freese, who just turned down his Cardinal Hall of Fame. He doesn't want to go.
Why not? Are they too woke?
Not worthy. Wasn't worthy. He was an alcoholic when he was with the Cardinals, and even though he hit the biggest home run that they'll ever have it again, because they're never going to win anything again.
Right, and he's a local guy.
Yes, he won't go. So Edmonds gets released after only 7 games with the Padres. I lost the stats here. That's great.
That's fine.
No, a lot more than that. 26. I could see it coming. It's like, oh, fuck, because the Cubs had a gaping hole in center field. Felix Pie started the year. He was their leadoff. It was their opening day
busted
center
out.
fielder. It wasn't going to work. The Cubs need a center fielder. Oh, fuck, we're going to get Jim Edmonds, the guy we hate more than anybody. And he's going to come, and he's going to suck because he can't play. He was embarrassed, falling down in the outfield with the Padres.
Right.
It's going to be terrible.
That's right.
Comes the Cubs, plays 85 games for them, hits 256, 369 on base, 568 slug, 19 homers, 49 RBIs.
Wow, 19 homers, damn.
And he was so impressive in 08 with the Cubs that he didn't play in 09. And then he came back with he finished up with the Brewers, and I didn't remember this. He played his final games with the Reds.
Wow.
15 games with the 2010 Reds.
NL Central bingo.
Yeah.
No Pirates, Jim?
But yeah, good old.
So where does that put us now? 2009. It's the calm after the storm. Pinella's still there, but the dust settles. Who's our center fielder in 2009?
He was your right fielder in 2008.
Matt Merton? No, wait. What am I saying?
You still see his jersey. If you go to a Cub game, you will see at least one of these.
Oh, Kosuke
Fukudome. He had to move to center because guess who came in to play right field?
Lay it on me.
Milton Bradley.
Oh, that's right. That was Jim. That was the big.
Got to get more left-handed.
Too many lefties.
That was their whole.
Not enough lefties yet.
Had to get left-handed.
For Kosuke, who was the hero on opening day in 08, but then whatever, and then now moved to center. It was so I'm guessing Kosuke was our guy for a couple of years in center, right?
Nope.
These are now the last days of the Tribune.
Well, remember, Milton, before the year even ends, Milton gets sent home.
Right, he's gone.
Kosuke's back to right field then.
Back to right, all right.
But there are some other notable center fielders on this team because I don't know that Milton was hurt a lot and then he just sucked. But other center fielders, Sam Fold played center field for the 09 Cubs.
Ran into a wall, I think, or was that Ben Grieve? Maybe it happened.
That was Ben Grieve, and he cut himself and bled all over his sunglasses.
I thought Fold may have done something similar, but could be wrong.
The dearly departed Ryan Friel.
Oh, and his friend Farney. Played center for the Cubs.
One of 6 games, 39 years old, but one of Pat Hughes' favorite players, former Cardinal, Japanese outfielder, So Taguchi. He said, man, that guy is So Taguchi. Yeah. Which is actually funny, especially for Pat. And then a guy who was more famous for jumping over a car.
Oh, Joey Gaithright.
Joey Gaithright. Yeah, but how did they not win more games with that? They also had Jake Fox. He played everywhere. I'm sure they probably played Jake Fox in center field for a while.
Might as well.
Ugh.
Yeah. My sentiments, exactly.
The 2010, they brought in a new center fielder. And he would be the opening day center fielder also in 2011.
David DeJesus?
Nope. You're a couple years too early.
I'm too soon, yeah. Oh, Marlon Byrd, All-Star.
He was their lone All-Star, yes. Marlon Byrd. Heavy-legged Marlon Byrd.
We have another Cubs center field all-star. This is great. Rick Monday, Jerry Morales, Leon Durham, and Marlon Byrd.
Yeah.
All right.
And they would trade him. He got traded in 12. And is that when did he flunk his drug test? I don't remember
that. I just like how is he a center field? He looked like I love Marlon Byrd. He was an all-star. He's a nice little hitter. But he looked like a fire plug. It seemed like another mismatched center fielder. Was he always a center fielder, like with the Phillies and stuff? Must have been.
I think he was.
He doesn't fit the profile.
The Rangers,
it's the most polite thing I can say.
In his career, he played. He played every game in the outfield, and he played 849 games in center, 460 in right, and 246 in left.
He is primarily a center fielder.
Yeah.
All right.
Doesn't grade out terribly good defensively. Defensive runs saved -8 for his career in center.
Can't say I'm surprised.
Kind of
a
big boy.
He was 6 foot. I felt like he was like 5'6". But yeah, 245. He was chubby.
But he played 152 games. He was the center fielder.
Well, he was an all-star.
And he got to finish up play his last 37 games for Mike Quaddy.
Yeah.
He's surging. Lou at the Cubs were 51-74, and Lou said, what do you want me to do? Fuck it. I'm going to go. Mom's not feeling good. I'm going to go home.
Right. That was his excuse to go home and float in the pool. This is fine because we were all sort of exhausted with the after all of it, just crashing down after 07-08. We needed a reboot, and Tribune finally sold the team, and then Sam Zell sold the team. And even though the weirdo inbred hillbillies from Nebraska bought it, they did have Theo Epstein fall into their lap. And then what happens there? Beginning what? Are we in 2012 now? Are we in the Theo era? Cubs center fielders?
We're going to be 11. We missed a guy in 08 and 09. I don't know how I missed him. Reed Johnson was a Cub in 08.
Yeah, I kind of tried to bring him up earlier. He had 2 different tours with the Cubs, too. He had the diving catch in Nationals Park where the brim of his hat was upturned. Very fun player. I think most Cub fans will remember Reed Johnson fondly. Never really an everyday center fielder, but there for many chunks and around some good teams. So if anyone wants to talk shit about Reed Johnson, they can talk to me because I'll set them straight.
Well, yeah. So Byrd and 10, and then he's Mike Quaddy's center fielder in 2011. And then does he get traded that year, or does he finish and then just leave? I don't remember.
He's like 33 at that point.
Oh yeah, he gets traded to the Red Sox. For Michael Bowden.
Yeah.
Pitcher, right? I believe he's.
I'll take your word for it.
And a player later who turned out to be Hunter Savenka. So that turned out great.
Is that a sort of decaffeinated coffee? Marlon Byrd.
Now we're in 2012, and we're in the Dale Sveum era. It's a brand new era. And the Cubs have a brand new. Big free agent signing.
I remember how excited I was to be at opening day 2012 and say this is not the first time the Cubs leadoff hitter is named DeJesus.
Yep.
Just happened to be a center fielder, not a shortstop. Right? David DeJesus?
David DeJesus. He would end up moving to right field and playing most of his games there because they brought up scrappy little Tony Campana.
Who gets credited with more. Yeah, he gets credited as the center fielder on record in 2012. How about that? The diminutive Tony Campana. Wow.
He was Nick Madrigal-esque. In his first 174 at-bats.
He was Nick Madrigal before me.
He had 46 hits. 40 of them were singles. 6 doubles. 5 RBIs. Yeah. And he hit 264, 308, 299. But there's a big difference in those 174 bats. He stole 30 bases in 33 attempts.
Oh, another Bobby Dernier.
He was fast. As a year later,
inside the park homer at Wrigley, was that it?
Yeah. What's his name? Yonder Alonso.
Oh,
playing out of position.
Ties into there. Yeah.
It all works out great for the Cubs. A couple of things worked out great for the Cubs with Yonder Alonso. So him and Joey Votto are both on the Reds, and only one of them could play first base. So they put Yonder in left, and Tony hits what should have been a double into the corner, and chubby Yonder couldn't find the ball, and Tony circled the bases for a home run. Then a few years later, maybe the next year, the Reds are like, all right, fine, we can't have both of you guys. So they trade him to the Padres, which makes the Padres now have an extra first baseman. So they trade him to the Cubs, and it's Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah. How about that?
Okay, so the 2012 Cubs, you get a lot of Tony Campana and David DeJesus in center field, but you also get former number 1 draft pick Brett Jackson.
Oh, former Cub number 1 draft pick.
Yes.
Oh my God, as late as 2012. Wow, I remember having high hopes for Brett Jackson and Nick Jackson and other guys in the wake of Corey Patterson and Felix Pie.
The thing that disappointed me about Brett Jackson's one season with the Cubs is that he came 1 strikeout short of striking out in 50% of his at-bats. He struck out 59 times in 120 at-bats.
I remember Brett Jackson as a prospect. I never would have guessed that he would have gone to the batter's box 142 times as a Cub in the 2012 season.
Now, there was not a whole lot going on. They didn't have...
Well, I mean, if I was younger and more of a prospect, I would have been excited because he was at one point a legit prospect.
He was a very toolsy player. Like, he could do everything except make consistent contact. And that's kind of limits
70% of center fielders flush out.
I mean, if you think a guy striking out like 30% of the time is bad, he was
imagine 50,
49%.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Yeah,
it's completely unplayable. Like, he was a good defensive center fielder. He was fast. He was a left-handed bat that had power in the minors, and he was useless. Completely useless.
Yeah. It's funny how that works.
And he moved fast. He went from the first round. He was the first round pick in 2009. He's in the big leagues in 12. So after
so he's not
just
that
2
old.
full seasons in the minors, he's in the big leagues. And he would only play 7 more big league games ever 2 years later for the Diamondbacks.
He got flushed out quick. Yeah, he got figured out quick. That's interesting.
Wow. I'm going to look at his minor league numbers here to see if there was...
Unlike Mike Tauchman, who takes forever to get to the majors, does a bunch of interesting things for a few years. Now he's 32. Like, it's funny. Like, Jackson made it up pretty quick, like you point out. They figured out he couldn't do it or something. Because it's not like, unlike Corey Patterson, they didn't give him chance after chance, but they just figured out, I mean, that 49% strikeout rate is probably all you need.
I think, his Cal numbers aren't on here. I think he struck out a lot in college.
Okay.
Like, I remember that. Well, there was a reason the guy with that kind of tools was the 31st pick. He wasn't, he was like the end of the first round. And it was like, this guy doesn't make enough contact. And the Cubs were like, we'll fix him. No, they didn't.
Right, exactly. The ego. This is a Cubs team. This is, it's sort of late stage. I'm not really sure who's in charge here, too. When they drafted him in 2008, there was definitely, I guess, Jim Henry still.
So he's the 31st pick. The 25th pick turned out to be pretty good. It's Mike Trout.
What year?
10. 9.
2010 is in
And it's funny, I've always thought this. So the Cubs, they had the great year in 2008 where they win 90 whatever games. If there was ever a Jim Hendry draft pick, it was Mike Trout, right? Like, the tools he looks for, that's the guy he would have wanted to pick. And because they had such a good record, even though he fell to the 25th pick, the Cubs were still 6 picks later. Like, they couldn't pick him.
Wow.
I'm sure they just screwed him up somehow, but...
The Cubs, one rare team of 97 wins that didn't have a lead for but 4 innings in the playoffs.
But how about this? So the Angels actually had, because they got a comp pick from a free agent that signed somewhere. So the Angels had the 24th and the 25th pick. They take Trout with the 25th pick. The 24th pick, they took Randall Grichuk.
Wow.
They clearly had him ranked ahead of Mike Trout.
Oh, my God.
And they lucked out. They got both. Future Cub Shelby Miller was the 19th pick.
God, I forgot the Cubs gave him another life preserver this year.
This is a rough draft. Strasburg went 1. Obviously, that worked out because he won a World Series for the Nationals. Zach Wheeler was 6th pick for the Giants. They eventually traded him for Carlos Beltran. A.J. Pollock was still playing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of bad in this first round. So
nothing compared to that, what was it, 76 draft? I can't remember what it was. You had earlier, and all kinds of players.
I don't know. We had that one star-studded draft. I never remember.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. I'll have to re-listen.
All right, so DeJesus is the center fielder in 12, gets moved to right field, but in 13, he's back in center on opening day.
On opening day, okay. Year 2 of Theo's rebuild.
And year 2 of Dale. The end of Dale.
I'm blacking out. I'm not following. I don't know who it is, except there is one guy, but he didn't. I looked him up because I wanted to cheat, and he did play a little bit of center field for the 2013 Cubs. So I'd like to bring him up if I could.
Junior Lake?
Yes. Would you read my mind?
I just looking. There he is. Dave Sapelt, too, was on that team.
He popped Dave Sapelt's another one. Wow. Now we're getting to the current
Dave
era.
Sapelt, who they got for the great Sean Marshall. Then they get Sapelt and Travis Wood.
Oh, I did not know that. I always think of Travis Wood for Sean Marshall.
And then that what was the little guy that kicked around the big leagues forever? Yeah, Ronald Torres.
Chris Dines? Oh,
they got
okay.
3 players. Theo got 3 guys for Sean Marshall, and Travis Wood, who was every bit as good, if not better, than Sean Marshall.
Probably was after the trade. Yeah.
Although Sapelt and Torres were kind of useless, but
yeah.
Ryan Sweeney played a lot of center field for that team.
Yeah.
Ryan Sweeney, the guy who famously looked like a world beater in batting practice. Like in BP before the games, hitting the ball like 500 feet. Everybody's like, woo! And then the game would start, and he'd take the same swing and hit it like 280 feet.
Nice. By the way, I'm on Junior Lake's page on Baseball Reference. Guess who his number 2 similarity score is?
Mel Hall.
Mike Talkman. Mike
Talkman. Oh, so we basically have White Junior Lake now.
And also,
how about number 4 on his list is Brian Bogusevic, and he played with him on the 2013 Cubs.
Oh, God. And then to bring it full circle is that he was the guy the Cubs traded to Baltimore for Tommy Hunter, who was like the very first deadline trade the Cubs had made, like in their to their advantage for a team that was looking to go to the playoffs. Tommy Hunter was a bust for the 2015 Cubs.
Yeah, the two big additions that year were Tommy Hunter and Dan Herron.
Yeah.
And the Cubs,
and
the rumor was
they got more out of waiver wire guys like the fat guy, Trevor. He was a waiver wire pick.
Trevor Cahill, Clayton Richard.
Yeah, Clayton Richard was the other one. There you go.
The rumor was the Cubs were working on a big trade on deadline day, and they just couldn't pull, and Theo couldn't pull the trigger on it. It was Javi Baez for Craig Kimbrell.
Jesus Christ, thank God he didn't. Because Hector was fine as the closer that year. So thank God.
He just decided that it wasn't worth giving up Javi to get.
No,
they needed a closer. They just weren't going to do it. And then that ended up being huge because Addison Russell gets hurt in the Cardinal series, and Javi hits the home
Baez
run.
Had to go short.
Javi hits the home run off Lackey.
3-run homer off of Lackey, yeah. And Javi until then had been a Swiss Army knife, third base, second base, shortstop, whatever. And he was the best player at all three of those.
And I think I could look this up, but I don't want to. I feel like Javi had been struggling, and then he took off after the trade deadline. Like, basically, he wasn't in trade rumors anymore, and he was just a part-time player anyway. Joe was picking spots for him.
What happened was that Javi was the first guy to get called up the year before, played a shitload, and ended up striking out at 40%. And then the next year continued to flail the whale.
He got sent to Iowa.
To start the season, which was the best thing that happened to him. And then he watched as like Soler, who was already back up on the team, and Russell come up. And then they all had like that season. Javi, they kept him down to like June or July. But when he came up, he played like everywhere, and he did everything they wanted. And that was my take. So once they did they did the right thing, like which they wouldn't do for Corey Patterson, for example. They let him just simmer and just go down there for a while. And when he came back up, he was Incredible defensive player.
So on your, you mentioned that Mike Talkman is his number 2, is Junior Lake's number 2. Most similar by age at 25 is Tuffy Rhodes.
Jesus. We found the nexus of Cubs center field. Yeah.
Let's see, the 13 Cubs, they just had so many bums on this team.
Well, because this was the churning everything over.
Brian Bogusevic, Scott Hairston. We already had Jerry, now we got Scott. Cole Gillespie, Darnell McDonald, 34-year-old Darnell McDonald, hit 302 for the Cubs.
Yeah. I was checked out.
Yeah. Steve Clevenger is on here listed as a third baseman.
I remember Steve Clevenger got hit at the end of a nationally televised game. He eventually got traded for Jake Arrieta, right?
Yes.
Along with Scott Feldman in the 2013 season.
And then he said something awful for the 2016 Mariners, and he never played again.
Yeah, if your name's Clevenger, you might be missing a frontal lobe.
Okay, so 2014, Rick Renneria, and opening day, who's playing center field for the Cubs?
It's not Emilio Bonifacio.
It is Emilio Bonifacio, and
he
not only played center field, he led off. So the first Cub batter in 2014 was Emilio Bonifacio.
And did he not get on base 5 times that game? I feel like he did.
I believe he got up to an incredible start to the season.
Yeah, he did. He reached base 12 out of his first 16 plate appearances. Former Marlin Emilio Bonifacio.
And he was number 64. Good old 64. And the reason I was like this, he liked to wear number 1. And he would go to different teams, and it was always either it was taken or it was a hassle. And when he got to the team he played for before the Cubs, who was it? The Dodgers, maybe?
So it was not
the Royals. He took number 64. He figured he'd pick a bad number, and he knew that on whatever team he got on, he could be number 64. That was why he picked it.
Okay.
And he wore it for the Royals, the Cubs, the White Sox, and the Braves.
Wow. All right.
I think the Cubs... So he played for the Braves a couple of times, right? Yeah. Who does... let's see. First things first. How did he start? Yeah, he had 4 hits on opening day.
Yeah, in Pittsburgh, right?
Pretty good way to open the season. And then they played a 16-inning game the next day, and he got 5 more hits.
Yeah.
He was 5 for 7. He started the season 9 for 12. Then he went 2 for 4, so the Pirates obviously did not know how to pitch to him.
And they were a good Pirates team, too.
Let's see. Through the first 8 games of the season, Emilio was hitting 500. He was 19 of 38. 500 with a 537 on base and a 579 slug.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Break up Emilio Bonifacio. And he was playing center and second.
Whatever.
Wherever you needed him. Wherever you needed him, Rick.
The 2014 season is one that we should all remember fondly, because it was the last season that didn't suck from beginning to end. So we knew it was going to suck in the beginning, but that was the year in which Arizmendi, Alcantara, Kyle Hendricks, and Javi Baez got called up. So things started changing.
Yeah.
But
they were fun by the end of it.
By the end of it, yeah. And Soler too came up that year. Everybody but
Jake almost threw a no-hitter in Boston.
Yep, I remember that.
With John Lester sitting in the dugout on the other side. He hadn't been traded to the A's yet. And then when Theo tried to pitch him on coming to the Cubs, one of the reasons was he's like, well, they turned Jake Arrieta into a stud. At least there'll be another guy on the rotation that can pitch.
How about that?
He gets traded at the trade deadline with James Russell to the Braves for Victor Caratini.
Oh, Captain Caveman.
Other guys to play center for the Cubs that year. Arizmendi, wait a minute, which one was he? He was Alcantara.
Yeah, he was the palate. He was the palate cleanser before Baez and Soler and Bryant and Schwarber, right? He was the first real proof that the Epstein era knew what they were doing.
Ryan Sweeney played 77 more games for the Cubs.
What is it with Ryan Sweeney?
Theo's pet project, Ryan Kalish. Had him with Boston, brought him to the Cubs. 57 games for the Cubs that year. Former Villanova football star Matt Caesar.
Yes.
33 games.
Well, he'd qualify as a center fielder, right?
Yeah, I would think he played a fair amount there. Let's see.
Or is he just a left fielder? He might have been a corner outfielder. Keen is missing vowels.
In 2014, he played 26 games for the Cubs, 13 in right, 9 in center, 6 in left.
Yeah.
And 1 is the DH.
Yeah.
Oof, where were you DH in Matt Caesar? Jesus.
Wow. Ask the current administration.
Couldn't DH Justin Ruggiano or Mike Holt?
Ooh, I remember Justin Ruggiano. He was the Italian guy that got replaced by another Italian guy, Chris Denorfia, by 2015. It's like the fourth or fifth outfielder.
Chris Denorfia looked exactly like Ryan Dempster.
Well,
so not as annoying.
We're talking looks.
So now we go to 2015, and Theo makes a controversial trade.
I get it.
Some would say a bad trade for the Cubs.
Even still. Even after all these years.
He trades Louis Valbuena and Dan Straley and gets Dexter Fowler. What the hell did Dexter Fowler ever do for the Cubs?
Was Dan Straley part of the Billy McKinney trade? Never mind. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I don't know why that name was familiar. Seemed like an earlier trade. Anyway, you're right. Your guy, Louis Valbuena, and his bat flips on singles.
Yes, the Billy McKinney trade. That's what people call that trade. Billy McKinney and Addison Russell.
That's right.
And
Dan
Straley for Jason Hamill and Jeff Samardzija. The famous Billy McKinney trade.
It was rattling around in my brain somewhere.
Well, you weren't wrong, but... All right, so the Cubs go out and they get this guy named Dexter Fowler, this freakish, long-legged dope.
Oh, an on-base machine.
And he just turns out to be the best center fielder they've had since Rick Monday.
Most memorable. Yeah, still doesn't measure up quantitatively to even Dernier because he was, only there 2 years.
2 years, and he was really only supposed to be there 1.
Correct.
He had an agreement with the Orioles and then went, fuck it, I don't want to play for the Orioles. And Theo's like, all right, we can only give you 1 year because we've got Albert Almora coming. We can't block center. It's not like this is happening right now with Cody Bellinger and Pete Crow Armstrong.
I'm so sad that this podcast does not end with Dexter Fowler and that there's gonna be like 20 more minutes. We're gonna have to go through the Albert Almora and the. But let's stop for a minute and appreciate Dexter Fowler because, again, regardless of anybody who's playing in this position for the Cubs, it's not going to be very long. So the team photo now since Rick Monday is basically Bob Dernier, which is just not even 4 years. Brian McRae, Corey Patterson just by volume. We're not really. Kenny Lofton and One Dog Johnson and Jerome Walton's rookie year are kind of floating there. But we're talking any sense of regularity. Dexter Fowler, even though it's only for 2 years, 2 memorable years. But yeah, solid. Nobody's going to forget him. He's in this discussion. Those 2 seasons pretty much puts him in the discussion for best center fielder in the last 50 years.
Yep. And it's funny, in 2015, he hits a big homer early in the year against the Rockies.
Troy, I was in Denver and that happened. Yes.
But then he's bad.
Yeah.
For all of May and all of June. And it's I don't know. What did we give up Louis Valbuena for this guy for? We could have Louis Valbuena. We could have Chris Bryant on the bench learning from Louis Valbuena. That's how it probably should have gone.
Yes.
But in the second half, he turns it on. He hits 275 with a 411 on base in July, 298 with a 408 on base in August. He slumps a little bit in September and October as the Cubs are making their charge. But then in the playoffs, I got to find it here.
Well, he was one of the 6 guys that homered in Game 3.
Yeah, he had a homer. They only had 3 hits against the Cardinals in that whole series. And he was okay. None of them hit against the Mets.
No.
But that was going to be it. He's going to be gone.
But he probably... You're right.
Albert's going to take over in center. Hey, Dexter, thanks for the 1 year.
Albert wasn't ready. It was... Who would it have been? Because Albert got called up during the World Series year, and he was...
Yeah,
even by objective measures, he was undercooked.
Well, they were going to... it was going to be... Well, I don't know. They had to figure out how they were going to play...
It was a Hayward
How they were
situation.
going to play Kyle Schwarber, Jason Hayward, and Jorge Soler.
That's what it was. And Hayward was going to be the center field, just like Soriano in 07. Kind of another half-baked.
So they basically decided in spring training, you know what? It's probably not a great idea to just turn the corner. Outfield's over to Schwarber and Soler. If we get Dexter, now we can kind of... Joe can mix and match. And then in Game 3...
And keep Hayward in right, which is where he was excelling at.
And then in Game 3, Schwarber and Fowler collide. Schwarber's gone.
Go figure.
And they had to go reacquire Chris Coughlin.
Right.
Who they had gotten rid of for Aaron Brooks.
But you're right.
Theo deciding that, maybe they should get a little depth worked out. Because then Dexter is back for 16, and he has a great year.
All the way through Game 7.
Everything's better. He hits 26 points better than he did in 15. He gets on base almost 50 points better than he did in 15. He slugs 36 points better than he did in 15.
Willing to wager he had the 2 best years of his career then too, as it turned out. He was good, good player overall, but I have to reckon he actually just
had his highest OPS was with the Cubs.
Yeah. Now
he was an all-star for the only time in 2016.
Yeah. So serendipity or whatever. Meant to be. We got the 2 best years out of Dexter Fowler. And he was a good player, but yeah, that well timed. But just 2.
So he's gone, and in 17, opening day center fielder was...
It was not Albert yet, though. He was still too green.
It was Jason
Hayward. How was it? So they went with the plan they would have gone into in 16 with. Yeah. Okay. As they wait for Almora. And Almora would, he would produce. He got called up in 16. Of course, he had the famous tagging up on first base and, Rajay Davis having poor footwork on the Chris Bryant, 10th inning sacrifice fly when Almora was pinch running for Schwarber. And Almora himself actually had a big clutch hit against the Nationals in the playoffs. He had a line drive off a lefty over shortstop that put them up. He had his moments. He had a homer against the Dodgers in the playoffs, but obviously he was not the answer. But the hope was that because we had so much immediate success with not necessarily Baez. Baez had a big one, but Soler had a high floor. Soler pretty much Soler got screwed early in 15 with the strike zone, but like Bryant and Schwarber and they're all in the 16 team, they're all contributing, and Almora kind of did his own way in bits and pieces in 17. And as fans, it's like, let's keep it going. But as a front office, they should have recognized that Almora was not going to be the answer. But
that was
almost in a Patterson-esque way, it took them too long to figure that out. Maybe
I just think they didn't want to admit it. Tom Loxis and I talked about this on a podcast about how when Theo came to the Cubs, one of the things, obviously he was incredibly accomplished with the Red Sox, but the thing everybody thought, and I'm guilty as anybody, is he's ruthless. This is the guy who traded Nomar. He'll do whatever it takes to win. And then I read the Terry Francona book because John Greenberg suggested I read it, and it becomes pretty clear in there that the Nomar trade it just had to happen. Nomar was a problem, and they'd pissed their season away in 03 against the Yankees, and 04 was going down the drain, and it was pretty easy to make the decision to launch Nomar, even though it wasn't popular. It was the right move. And Theo did kind of have a history of falling in love with his own guys, and usually they were good, so it really didn't matter. But he did it with the Cubs. The Cubs didn't. There's a lot of these guys that they should have known early were overrated and capitalized on it, like the Braves used to do. And they didn't do it. They kept them all, thinking, so then you look, and Almora leaves for nothing. Schwarber gets DFA'd by Jet.
Schwarber was actually valuable.
They did make a good trade with Jorge, but it was only for 1 year. Wade Davis, and they had no plan to keep Wade after 1 year.
And it got him nothing.
And they, and then they lose Bryant and Baez and all the Rizzo and those guys. A year late, they trade them all, and it diminishes what they got back for him. So
The interesting thing about Almora was that he was always slow, even though he tagged up from first in the World Series. But he actually was like a decent, like he had that range like a Dwight Smith never had. But he was, it didn't matter. He didn't have enough bat. So like, but he wasn't even as good of a, like, that was his thing. It was like, oh, he knows how to just like run to a spot and catch a ball. He kind of did. But because he wasn't that fast, that he kind of caught up to him in the big leagues.
He caught everything he could get to, but he couldn't get to enough.
Yeah, and he couldn't get to enough, and then he could never hit, of course.
Like Tauchman's the same way. Like if Tauchman can get to it, he'll catch it. Almora, if he could get to it, would catch it. But there's a lot of balls that were bouncing off the wall because he just was too fucking slow to get to it. And then his problem as a hitter was he could hit bad pitches, make contact, and he did. And so he made a lot of weak contact, and then he's slow, and he wasn't going to beat any of those out.
He was not.
He never walked. He was, that was a guy that and then they had the weird story. That was the year they took him instead of Corey Seager because Corey Seager was too tall to play shortstop.
Right. Not considering that Almora was too short and squat to play
guys
center.
that went right at, like Max Fried went right after him.
Yeah. That is also.
There's Seager and Waka, Marcus Stroman. It
should be pointed out that this is actually Theo and Jed's first draft for the Cubs too, right? Almora was there. That's part of the reason that they were irrationally attached to him.
Yeah.
That they
guys get that way.
Acquired by us.
We're living through it right now with Nick Madrigal because that was the only big leaguer that Jed got in the big sell-off was Madrigal. And it's like, come hell or high water, he's going to prove the guy can play. It's like, well, I got news for you. The more you play him, the less he's going to prove he can play.
Yeah. But Almora was given a long rope, so as far as games played, he's probably in that discussion, right? He's probably ranked 5th or 6th, which speaks more, again, to what we're doing here in the last 50 years.
He's listed on Baseball Reference, he's listed as the center fielder on that team.
Which team?
2017? Yeah. But
the year after the World Series.
Yeah. John Jay played a bunch of games in center. Another guy who was slow. He at least got
on
base
about
that year.
The John Jay frustration was that he maxed out like in August and September, and you knew he was crashing to earth, and it was almost like the Corey Patterson September of 2004.
But the best center fielder they had in the 2017 Cubs made the most clutch play.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Can we luxuriate in the fact that the year after the Cubs finally won the World Series, that they go into St. Louis for a team that's still fighting to stay alive, and on 3 successive nights, I believe the Cubs, A, first night clinched the division, B, the second night clinched home field, and then the third night eliminated St. Louis themselves with 4 games to go, something like that. And I want to say, I could have this wrong, that C happened. The 27th out was, what the hell was his name? Leonis
Martin robbed a home run off, I think, Randall Grichuk.
Oh, even better.
And I think that was the game that did Hendricks almost throw a no-hitter?
I think that was the same. It might have been the same series.
I remember so the Cubs, they clinched the first night, and then they play their hungover lineup the next day. And they still beat the Cubs, which was great.
And there was some reward for it,
like
though.
Schwarber had to play.
Level.
That was like the joke. Was everybody on that team knew how hungover Kyle was, and you can't swap out the whole team. You don't have enough guys on the roster. So Kyle's out there, still half in the bag playing left field.
Awesome. And then Leonis, like a chance for the Cardinals to keep their season alive. I want to say, or for one more day, have a chance to tie the game in the 9th inning, and then our defensive replacement, Leonis.
Oh, it was Paul DeJong.
Okay.
Hit a fly ball to deep center field. It was caught by Leonis Martin, and the Cubs had taken the lead in the. It went extra innings. Let's see, did the Cubs tie it late?
Oh, okay.
Went extra innings, and Taylor Davis.
Oh, the beardy catcher.
To give the Cubs the lead. And then the Cardinals, it looked like the great Jen Ho Sang was pitching for the Cubs. It looked like Paul DeJong was going to tie the game and keep the Cardinals season alive, but Leonis reached up over the wall and pulled it back. And the Cubs won, and the Cardinals were eliminated.
Oh, beautiful. Moments like that. Thank you, Leonis Martin. I hope we gave you your just due in our discussion of 50 years of Cubs center fielders.
2018, the guy who plays center field on opening day leads off the entire season for Major League Baseball with a home run.
Oh, Ian Happ. So it wasn't Albert. Yeah, that was in Florida. I remember that. Oh, yeah. Now we're brushing up on the modern Cubs.
Yes.
As we've already discussed, Ian Happ.
Right? Wasn't that Yu's debut?
That sounds right.
Maybe he pitched the next game, and then.
Yu was hurt. I don't think Yu debuted for a few weeks, maybe.
That was Lester.
Or maybe he did.
I don't know why I was thinking.
Was shut down. Lester was still in the 2018 Cubs, but yeah, that was Ian Happ. I mean, like we've talked about it before. Like he's a very suspect left fielder, but he wouldn't go glove because they've lowered the bar. The fact that he was an opening day center fielder speaks more to the Cubs' ineptitude than any prowess that our guy Ian has, who has finally stabilized his career to be somewhat, maybe slightly above average, but the fact that he's part of the discussion of Cubs center fielders just reinforces what we're doing here.
That was my frustration with the extension they gave him, is that if he could put up the kind of offense he puts up at center or second base, he's probably worth that money. But he's not worth $20 million in left field. He does not produce enough offense in left field. And he can't play center and he can't play second. He's proven it.
If he's going to play left, you might as well have kept Schwarber, who's like a slightly similar player with more power.
Yeah.
That's my take.
And Kyle was on display tonight. First pitch of the game, he had a home run. And then in the fifth inning, he dropped a fly ball. So it was all the Kyle Schwarber. You got the full Kyle Schwarber experience.
I love Kyle Schwarber. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, you stick Happ in left. But as a center fielder, if he was hitting like he was this year and playing borderline competent defense, then that's a center fielder we could probably live with, I suppose.
So this was this was Albert's best season, right?
Amora?
No, I guess 17 was. 17 was the only year he was league average. He got worse every year.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, and I know this from memory. His first half of 2018 was awesome. Look at his 20, because that was when he almost made the All-Star team. He almost made the All-Star team in 2018. I swear to God. Tell me what his numbers were on July 1st, and I will tell you that he was probably ranked one of the top 5 center fielders. And then it's from that point that it was just nothing but frustration. And
2018, his first half, 319, 357, 438.
Jesus Christ, we thought we had it.
Second half.
There's our answer.
Second half, 232, 267, 280.
Yeah.
The whole team stopped hitting, especially him.
For all you folks listening, we're looking for the holy grail on the center fielder here.
June.
And we thought we had it.
He hit 363 with a 375 on base and 495 slugging in June that year. And then the ass fell right out of the season.
And it never came back.
In wins for the Cubs that year, he hit 327. In losses, he hit 227.
He also hit some kid in Houston with a foul ball. Some people like to attribute that.
Was that year or the next?
But no.
I feel like that was 19.
No, it's 18. It's 18. It's in Houston. But I'm going to tell you, too, that I think that's a little bit revisionist. That's a little bit like the whole, Corey Patterson was lighting the league on fire until he blew his knee out.
He'd already started to come to earth.
It was weird. You remember that when Almora hit that foul ball in the stands at Minute Maid Park. But that was in 2018.
It's the reason they finally put the frickin' netting up.
Yes, and it was around his hot streak. So I don't know. Not to go all Dickie Son, but maybe it was. Who knows? But I that's pretty thin evidence, for a guy who played so many thousands of innings. All of a sudden, I would think, not to be insensitive, but Jesus, he played 152 games that year.
So Albert was the opening day center fielder in 19.
Okay.
He had a bad year: 236, 271, 381. The next year in the COVID year, he had 167. He only played in 28. Well, he played in 28 games. Then he played 60. And then he was gone. He went to the Mets, and then he finished up with the Reds. The same guy played center field in 20 and 21 on opening day.
Is it Ian Happ again?
It's Ian Happ again. So he's played
Jesus
three.
Christ.
He has played center field opening day 3 times. One of the most this whole thing. One of the guys who played the most is Ian Happ.
He's forcing himself into the conversation. Our barely borderline defensively adequate left fielder is in the conversation for regular Cubs center fielders. That's just great.
Well, and it's funny. So he was the opening day center fielder in 18, 20, and 21. In 18, he had a 761 OPS. That's not that great. But in 19, it was 898. And in 20, 19 was the year he didn't do it in 19 because he spent the whole first half in the minors.
Correct.
And
that was his Javi Baez moment.
It looked like it worked.
Yeah, just like it was do with Baez.
And then he was probably their best offensive player in the pandemic year until he hit himself in the face with a foul ball. Remember that?
Oh.
And his numbers fell off.
No,
he was the only
but
offense.
I do remember
he was the only offense they had in the playoffs. He's the only guy who could.
The only home run. Yeah.
And then in 21, up until the trade deadline, he was one of the worst players in baseball. Like, he was on the verge. Right. In fact, Ross had to call him in and basically tell him he was no longer an everyday player. He was going to have to just, his major league career was heading down the drain. But then everybody gets traded, and now he has to play because they don't have anybody else.
Right.
And he gets hotter than shit. And now they're going to pay him $20 million a year.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Do you remember who led off last year? Or not who led off, who played center field last year on opening day?
No, because I'm old and my memory only works.
It's the second time this guy did it. He did it 5 years apart.
Whoa. Jesus Christ, my synapses are not firing.
Christ,
no. It's not Jesus Zuleta. Who is it?
Jason Hayward.
Oh my God!
That just shows you what the 22 Cubs were built to do.
That is a fun fact, actually. So the arc of Jason Hayward's contract is basically he was rushed into being a center fielder the second year, or actually the first year, or whatever, and then due to attrition and his own lack of productivity.
Well, he had to play center after Dexter went away. So his second season.
But he was not.
Cubs. And then he did it again.
That's the arc. That's the arc. It was his third season when he played. Okay.
This is quite the lineup on opening day that had Jason Hayward in center field last year.
Okay.
Rafael Ortega leading off as your designated hitter. Nick Madrigal at second base. Wilson Contreras, Ian Happ, Frank Schwindel, Seiya Suzuki, Jason Hayward, Patrick Wisdom, Nico Horner. And they won, right? Yeah, they beat Corbin Burns.
That's right.
Kyle Hendricks pitched and they won. I think they won. They start off 2-0 and then go right in the shitter.
5-4. They won the first two. They won 3 out of 4. They won 5 out of 7. Yeah. They did not actually tag.
And they remembered that they were bad, and it went very, very bad. And then they were 11-2 the last 13 games.
Well, that happens in a lot of
3, I guess, last 14 games.
Right.
And then do you remember who led off, or who? I keep saying led off. Do you remember who played center field on opening day this year?
Opening day center field. I mean, I seem like I pay so little attention now. Who the hell is the Cubs? It's not the current center fielder. Is that what we're saying here?
It is. The guy who just returned to center field today from his injury, Cody Bellinger.
Oh yeah, I got Cody. Yeah.
Yes, an actual good player.
Right. Another one. Will he be an all-star this year? Will he join Marlon Byrd and Leon Durham?
I think he missed too much time, and his numbers are just they're okay.
No, yeah, that's right. But he certainly ranks. I mean, well, obviously
he's not having all-star. 260, 322, 452. He is, however, he might be their. Let's see, he's their best defensive center fielder since.
Wow.
Damon Buford.
Lofton was good. Is Bellinger that good? Is he better than like a 32-year-old Kenny Lofton? Is he better
really
than a 27? He is good. I agree.
He's an elite defensive center fielder. He's also their best first baseman.
Which I love. Right. Oh.
Because he actually catches the ball with his glove.
I do love watching a good center fielder. I think about, in my opinion, the greatest center fielder objectively that I ever saw in person or on television was Andrew Jones. Just because he never made us, like a lot of people sometimes get confused if they don't know baseball that well. Not to be an elitist, but like they'll see circus catches made over the fence or in the wall. I never saw Andrew Jones dive or jump for a ball. You just would see some dude hit a fucking rope to left center, and then Andrew Jones is just standing there because that's really what a good outfielder, a good center fielder, right fielder, just knows how to track a ball and get there. And so what we've spent the last 2 hours talking about is like kind of a holy grail. Like we have no stability. We've had few elite players. Bellinger, you mentioned. Kenny Lofton with the Indians was one of these players, just like one of those guys that a pitcher like makes a mistake and a ball player tags it, and you go, oh, it's okay. It's okay. My guy, look, he's standing right there. And so he does. We've never really had that at all, like year in and year out. We've had tastes of it. We've had like washed up guys that were shells of themselves that used to be like that. We're just asking for the most basic, the lowest bar here, but like a great center fielder is one of the greatest things to watch in baseball.
Right. So in the Cubs, even Cody, the Cubs get him after he was Rookie of the Year and MVP, and then terrible. Like the Dodgers are just like, we can't fix it. We've tried everything, and the Cubs get him, and he always was able to play defense. As long as he's healthy enough to play, he could always play defense. And he's been good offensively, and he stands out on this team because they have very little offense other than him. But they have no plan to keep him more than a year. That was the whole idea. Like they're handing it over. Right. They hope to Pete Crow Armstrong next year, who I'm sure can immediately play center. They could call him up today, and he could defensively play center field. There's no doubt about that. But is he going to be able to do that? We don't know. And why would you put all your eggs in that? Like, what would it hurt to have signed Cody for 2 or 3 years? Because he can play other positions.
You put Pete in the corner. Don't do that. Don't put too much pressure on him. Yeah.
Okay, so I went and looked up who I think the 5 best center fielders in Cubs history are. This goes all the way back to the White Stockings.
Ever?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And there's some asterisks because I think the best center fielder ever was a guy that I can't imagine could do anything defensively.
Hack Wilson?
Hack Wilson.
All right.
Hack played mostly center field from 1926 to 1931. And he hit .322, .412, .590 with 190 home runs and 769 RBIs in 850 games.
And
he was an alcoholic while he did it.
Right, and Bill Veeck used to have to pour 20-year-old Bill Veeck used to have to pour ice cubes on him in the tub in the clubhouse as he recovered from hangovers. And he also had a long-standing, still does, I believe, National League record for 191 RBIs. Used to be 190 until Jerome Holtzman
found one.
190, found one. But I think you are basing all that on offensive numbers.
It's all offensive. We don't know, and I just can't imagine.
There is one anecdotal fact about Hack Wilson as a center fielder, and it is this: that in the 1929 World Series, with the Cubs, I believe up 2 games to 1, or maybe the series was tied 1-1, but the Cubs were up 8-2. And I know my history because I thought about this game during the aforementioned Bartman game. I think it was a 1-1 series in Philadelphia. Cubs were up 8-2. Some guy in the Philadelphia A's hit a fly ball to center, and Hack Wilson lost it in the sun. And then like 9 runs scored after. The Phillies scored. The Cubs never won another game. And so I'm like, all right, well, combined with that anecdotal story and the fact that Hack Wilson looked like a human fire hydrant, maybe he really wasn't that great of a center fielder. He's a product of his times, a live ball era, and defense was an afterthought. Okay. I don't know who would have been great.
I agree with that completely. But when I finish the list, see if we think anybody's better.
Okay, sure.
So then, a guy named Jimmy Ryan. You remember Jimmy Ryan?
Well, like 1890s, I think.
1885 to 1900. Played center field. Hit .308 with a .375 on base, .444 slug. Wow. He had 118 home runs in just 2014 games.
Wow.
And that probably was a lot for back then.
Yes. Dead ball and probably a lot of ballparks with no fences, so the motherfucker had to run. All right. Hey, I'm down with Jimmy Ryan right now. He's the leader in the club.
Then there's the center fielder from 1943 to 1951, although he had to play a little third base once in a while.
Yeah. And I don't know how much Andy Pafko was a true, like, a Willie Mays. Like, Was he? He was only with the Cubs for like 6 or 7 years. Yeah, he was part of the last pennant winner.
Parts of 9.
But sure. Yeah, let's put him in
Parts
there.
of 9 years he played for the Cubs.
But he played like third base and shit.
294,
right? So,
362, 468 slug, 829 OPS.
all right.
I can't read my own stuff here. He had 126 home runs, 584 RBIs. He was a 5-time All-Star. He stole 28 bases in all of those years and got caught 35 times. That's a lot of that going on with the Cubs center fielders.
Well, but that was also a clod-footed era between the Ty Cobb and Lou Brock era where nobody stole bases, really. So, pretty good ratio. All right.
Then Rick Monday.
Okay.
270, 366, 460, 106 home runs, 293 RBIs, 37 stolen bases, and 42 caught stealings. Just still hilarious.
All right.
Andy
Pafko.
Then Bob Dernier. 84 to 87, 264, 330, 355, 119 stolen bases, 34 caught stealings, won a Gold Glove. Got acquired with Porfy, Altamirano, and Gary Matthews for Bill Campbell and Mike Diaz. Pretty good trade for the Cubs.
As we know, and as you pointed out, like the Phillies just assumed the Cubs wouldn't do anything with them, and it backfired, which was great for us. So I'm assuming your calculus is some sort of a intersection of quantity and quality.
Yeah, it's.
These 5.
Right. You can't just be. The Cubs have been around for what?
Right.
180 years, whatever the fuck it is. You can't just have a guy. We can't have Kenny Lofton as a top 5 guy for 56
or
games.
Dexter Fowler, for that matter.
Well, no, number 5. I don't know where you're going to find better. It's Dexter.
Yeah.
How about this? We can go through Dexter's stats, but how about this? What do Dexter Fowler and Jimmy Slagle have in common?
Neither have died from tuberculosis.
They are the only 2 Cubs center fielders to ever win World Series.
What?
Jimmy Slagle was the center fielder in 7 and 8, and
it
Dexter in 16.
I would have guessed it was Hank Wildfire Schulte.
He may have been one of their outfielders, but they have Jimmy Slagle listed as a center fielder.
Okay, there's that. But of course, Jimmy Ryan played on some Cubs teams that didn't have the privilege of playing in the World Series.
Yeah, because there was no World Series.
Right now,
the Cubs.
Yeah,
the White Sox.
Right now, right, or the Colts, or
the
Cap Anson's like little band of racists. I don't know, but I feel like right now, lacking any further evidence, and
Jimmy Ryan.
Yes, I had only vaguely heard of Jimmy Ryan before tonight until you kind of broke down those numbers. Those are some pretty historic pre-20th century offensive numbers.
He was born during the Civil War.
Sure, right.
His nickname was Pony.
Yeah.
And he played 15 years for the Cubs, 16 years for the Cubs.
The numbers that you report, I honestly, I'm not trying to be cute here. In 120 years, I don't know that bar has been cleared. Dexter's a great argument on quality, like over quantity.
How about this for Jimmy Ryan? He also he pitched in 24 games. He was 6-1 with a 3.62 ERA.
Wow. Also, personal note,
he pitched in the World Series against the Browns.
See, all right. I think we're getting not to cap it up any further here, but before I moved out to the northwest suburbs, I used to live in the northern edge of Chicago in Rogers Park, and our backyard looked out onto the Chicago-Evanston border, which was a cemetery, which is what all cemeteries are always pushed to the ends of town. And the Evanston Cemetery is called Cavalry, from my third-story deck on Juneway Terrace in Rogers Park, Chicago, 15 years ago, I looked out over into this old Evanston Cemetery, where apparently Jimmy Ryan is buried.
There you go.
So I can no longer abide by. I love Dexter Fowler. I love Bobby Dernier. Jimmy Ryan died long before I was born, apparently 50 years. But I have to say that everything else considered, even with the Kenny Loftons and the limited samples from everybody else, that the true last Cubs great center fielder, the number one on the list, is Jimmy Ryan.
Yeah, I think it's Hack.
Yeah, but Hack lost that ball in the sun.
He was so good that Kai Kyler couldn't even play center. That's how good.
Kai Kyler was a great player. I don't know how good of a defensive player he was.
None of them probably.
So maybe, yeah. I mean, because that was an era of no stolen bases, no, right? Like in between Ty Cobb and Lou Brock, I feel like outfield defense and like base running was an afterthought.
How about
this?
The 29 Cubs. Rogers Hornsby hit 380. Riggs Stevenson hit 362. Kai Kyler hit 360. And Hack Wilson hit 345.
Wow.
How'd they ever lose? 98 and 54 and lost the World Series. Well, they lost the World Series because Hack fucked up a fly ball.
Well, that's why he gets eliminated from the discussion for greatest center fielder, even though he has 56 homers.
It's got to be him. And it just shows that the Cubs, that it's ridiculous that this franchise has been around for as long as it has. And we can't identify their greatest center fielder.
Well, we can't even whittle it down to like 3. Like what? Like it's so unclear. Like first base, you say, all right. Well, first base, you might not be able to name it, but you will get like 5 like unambiguous qualified for you. Like, all right.
Yeah, it should be. With 148 seasons, we should be fighting over like 3 great players and which one's the best. Instead, we're like, I don't know, maybe this guy.
Right. Not arguing whether or not Kenny Lawson's mattering 56 games
the best
actually
center fielder
because of
in a century and a half of Cub baseball,
or frankly Dexter Fowler, more realistically, like someone who legitimately was there for 2 full successful seasons, but that's it. And yet, like, hey, give me an argument like for chubby little Hack Wilson like blowing a series in 29 or Jimmy Ryan in his absence of a mustache in the 19th century. So this goes far beyond Andy Pafko now that we've talked about it. It goes far beyond Rick Monday, far beyond Andy Pafko. These Cubs teams that build that senior build that won 4 pennants in 10 years between 29 and 38, perhaps their fatal flaw was the fact that their pudgy home run hitting drunk was playing center field, and that the fact that they didn't have a real one is why they didn't win a World Series then. So I'm starting to think we're through the looking glass, Andy. This absence of a center fielder goes much deeper than we even thought when we started this 2 hours ago.
Yeah, because I don't think it's not this hard to pick the best player at any other position for them.
You want to try it? Want to take 2 minutes speed round? Third base, whatever. Ron Santo or Ramos.
Yeah.
Bryant, third base. Shortstop. I mean, that's hard. Shortstop, Ernie Banks. Second base, Sanders. Right? First base, again, a plethora of
First base is an argument because there's good choices, not because we can't think of one.
Right. How about catcher?
Catcher is Gabby Hartnett, probably, right?
Or
Wilson Contreras.
Or, Jody, if you want to be. So that's it, though. You cut off the line there. Right field, you mentioned.
Yeah, Sammy Sosa.
Sosa. I mean, outfield's weird because you know who played what. Because we talked about Billy Williams hitting the shit out of the ball out of left field. Either one of those. Riggs Stevenson, Kyler. That's probably it. But whatever. Yeah, Sammy and Billy. I'm good with that. Center field, and then we go down this fucking rabbit hole. We named hundreds of guys now, but you can't whittle it down to anything close to those other positions.
Right.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Even more so than I expected. So.
Well, they're so good it only took us 2 hours and 39 minutes to cover 148 years of Cubs center fielders.
Just wait until Pete Crow Armstrong makes his debut. He will.
Yeah. We'll do another 239 just on Pete. All right. Well, I think we have. I think we covered it all.
I can't imagine we hadn't, for Christ's sake.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andy.
Many of us have herpes.
I just want this to be over.